Chapter 537. No wonder he's the most powerful expert in the world. The power of this strike is earth-shattering. I'm afraid no one in this world can withstand this strike. Everyone was amazed. No, retreat. Li Fu's expression suddenly changed. He appeared beside Rinpoche at lightning speed, grabbed him with one hand, and ran down the mountain. At the same time, a slender, jade-like hand grabbed his other arm. The Empress stared coldly at Li Fu. "Are you trying to snatch my man? Stop looking and run. The mountain is going to collapse." Li Fu shouted, released his hand, and jumped down the mountain. At this time, the mountain shook even more violently. Everyone was shocked to hear this, and they couldn't care less about anything else as they jumped down the mountain one after another. Boom! The entire left side of the mountain collapsed from the waist down. Rocks the size of a human flew everywhere, and large pieces of gravel and soil fell down. The earth-shattering scene shocked everyone. Everyone fled as fast as they could. After a while, the Empress returned to the barracks with Rinpoche. The rumbling sound was still incessant and even louder than before. When everyone turned around to look, they saw a scene that scared them out of their wits. They saw that the right side of the mountain was also collapsing toward the left side. The gravel and soil rushed into the forest and flooded the barracks. "Retreat quickly." The Empress's cold voice spread throughout the area, but there was something strange in her voice. Even she was shocked by the power of this strike. The surrounding soldiers had long been alarmed by the earth-shattering scene in the distance, and they quickly ran for their lives when they heard this. As for Rinpoche, his eyes were wide open with a dull look on his face. That idiot shattered the mountain with one strike. This was a mountain with a radius of a few kilometers, and it was actually shattered by one strike. Was it really that powerful to die a little? The collapse of the mountain lasted for 4 hours before it stopped. The soil and gravel didn't hit the barracks, but it flattened a small part of the forest at the foot of the mountain. Everyone stood there and looked at the scene in front of them in shock. There were originally 2 mountain peaks, but at this time, more than half of the one on the right was gone. That place had become a pile of gravel and soil. The Wang estuary was gone. Everyone turned their heads to look at Li Fu, who had his mouth wide open in confusion. Then they looked at the hill in the distance with faces full of shock. Was this the strength of the number one in the world? This was no longer a human. He was simply a god. Rinpoche's brain was in a mess. The scene in front of him was beyond his understanding. Was this really something a human could do? Even the corners of the Empress's eyes were twitching. She weighed the disparity between her and Li Fu in her heart. After a while, she felt somewhat disappointed. Li Fu's strike had dispelled her thoughts of fighting him. Senior is indeed worthy of being the world's most powerful expert. Rinpoche finally regained his senses after an unknown period of time. With a shocked look on his face, he said sincerely, "Such a person was worthy of being a walking nuclear warhead." This kind of strength completely shattered his previous understanding of this world. After hearing what Rinpoche said, everyone looked at Li Fu again. The world's number one, fully deserving of the title. I'm afraid that we won't be able to find a second person in the next 1,000 years. Shiwanya sighed. It was a pity that such an expert was not from the Aboriginals. Indeed, fully deserving. Qingyin's sword and Zhuocheng were full of admiration. The two of them were different from the others. The others were Aboriginals, and the martial arts they practiced were different from them. On the other hand, the martial arts they practiced were similar to Li Fu's. Li Fu was indeed a lighthouse on their way forward. Although he was very far away from the two of them, they could see a possibility. Just by looking at their worshipful expressions, Rinpoche felt that they had become Li Fu's die-hard fans. Shattering a mountain with one strike is fearsome and terrifying, the Empress said softly. Li Fu blankly looked at everyone, looked down at the dragon turtle rod in his hand, and then at his hands. Could it be that his strength had unknowingly reached this level? Although everything had a weak point, this weak point only increased the power of an attack by a few times. It would be fine if it was a smaller object, but it was a mountain. When he struck with his rod, he could only shatter an area with a radius of 1,000 meters, which was already considered the limit of this world. Now, it wasn't just an area with a radius of 1,000 meters, but the entire mountain. He didn't expect that he had unknowingly reached such a level. Although he had never thought of practicing and only wanted to find the gods in heaven, his cultivation level was constantly rising, but this wasn't his ambition. Li Fu was a little disappointed and frustrated. Even with his strength, he still hadn't found the stairway to heaven. Fortunately, there was a little hope now. Rin Baqian noticed Li Fu looking at him and was sincerely convinced. "Instructor, I want to learn this. You must teach me." In Shuiyang City, the experts in the city landed on top of the city wall and looked at the Wang estuary in the distance. The earth shaking and mountains shaking just now had alarmed everyone. Some people were bewildered. What exactly happened there? Although they couldn't see it, the fact that the sound and vibration could be transmitted here was enough to show how powerful the earthquake was. As for the others, they understood what had happened. "I'm afraid that those barbarians wanted to cross the Wang estuary at night, and Mr. Yu Yang cut off the supporting pillars, causing such a drastic change?" Xiaokuan asked. "It seems so. Those barbarians definitely didn't expect us to prepare such a big gift for them." I really want to see Qi Zixiao's expression at that time. Rao Yu laughed heartily. According to this power, even if Qi Zixiao was there, he wouldn't have survived. Senior Su and Senior Ji Shui have already gone to investigate. We will know when they return. Young Master Ning from the Yun Nation laughed. So what if it was Qi Zixiao? Zhu Wuzhen at the front line was overwhelmed by the barbarians. He was known as a famous general, but he couldn't compare to a few words from him. After an hour, two figures appeared from the darkness with shocked expressions on their faces. "What's the situation?" The leaders of the three major powers immediately asked. "The Wang estuary is gone. The entire mountain has collapsed." The two spirit wheel experts who went to investigate landed on top of the city wall and said. Then, Mr. Yu Yang, Xiaokuan asked in a deep voice. The cave entrance was buried, and no one came out. "I'm afraid," the two of them said sadly. "How could this be?" Xiaokuan was shocked. According to the plan, they only needed to leave a few men of sacrifice behind. Why didn't Mr. Yu Yang escape? What about Xiao Ku and his clansmen? Mr. Bu asked anxiously. I didn't see Mr. Qiu or his clansmen or those strange beasts, the two spirit wheel experts answered. How could this be? Everyone was shocked. According to the plan, Mr. Qiu and his clansmen would evacuate first, and Mr. Yu Yang would wait until the last moment before leaving. Both sides could have completely retreated. How could they all disappear? Xiaokuan's expression was uncertain. After a while, he said, I'm afraid something unforeseen happened that we don't know about. Or maybe Mr. Yu Yang and Mr. Qiu realized that the barbarians wanted to pass through during the night and couldn't retreat in time, so they cut off the heavenly crystal and perished together with the barbarians. I'm afraid so. Mr. Yu Yang and Mr. Qiu, as well as Mr. Qiu's clansmen, are really brave warriors. Taizai said. He had a higher opinion of the people from the Six Doors. He didn't expect that there would be such experts in the sect. Although those who knew Mr. Yu Yang didn't think that he was that kind of person, the truth was right in front of them. Everyone changed their opinion of Yu Yang. Were the casualties of the barbarians? Everyone asked. If Mr. Yu Yang, a spirit wheel expert, couldn't escape, the aboriginals would probably suffer heavy casualties. At the thought of this, many people looked relieved. As long as this group of aboriginal elites died, Dayo would no longer be able to worry about Tianjin Basin. They wouldn't even be able to defend Gu City. It was really a landslide just now, and it was difficult for the two of us to get close. Furthermore, it was late at night, and it was difficult to see. The two of us will go and take a look tomorrow morning. Thank you, sirs, the leaders of the three major powers said. At this moment, the haze in everyone's hearts had finally dissipated. All that was left was to go to the Wang estuary tomorrow morning to check on the casualties of the aboriginals. Chapter 538. Early in the morning, a faint mist pervaded between heaven and earth. Two figures leaped out of the city and disappeared into the mist in the distance. It didn't take long before the two of them arrived near a mound of dirt. Who would believe that this was a mountain that was hundreds of meters high just a day ago? However, all of this was gone now. Looking at the current situation, they could still recall the scene of a landslide last night. There's no one and no traces left behind. It seems like Yu Yang and the rest are really buried underground. After carefully searching the west side for a while, one of them sighed slightly. Previously, I underestimated Yu Yang. I didn't expect him to have such an unyielding side, the other person said. Although Yu Yang has become one with the earth, he has done a great deed for all living beings in Tianjing Basin. In the future, we should set up a memorial for him. I wonder what the casualties of those barbarians are like. This time, the collapse was more severe than expected. Other than Qi Zixiao, Shi Wanya, and a few other experts, the soldiers from the Protectorate of the South and the winged cavalry had no chance of escaping. The so-called unable to escape, even if they had wings, is what they faced at that time. Be careful. Let's go to the top of the mountain and take a look. The two of them reached the top of the mountain in a flash. The traces left behind by the landslide here were much more serious than on the other side. This was because the mountain had collapsed towards this side. The valley between the two mountains had been completely filled up. As for the forest on the south side of the mountain, half of it had been submerged by the mud. Further south, there was a large campsite. It was as if nothing had happened. The patrolling soldiers, smoke rising from kitchen chimneys, and soldiers busy with all kinds of things. It was a peaceful scene. Although the landslides and the fissures were very close to them, they were separated by the forest into two different worlds. One world was tattered and full of holes, while the other world was as if nothing had happened. The two of them widened their eyes in an instant. Why was the other party's campsite still there? Why did it seem as if nothing had happened? Why? The two of them couldn't figure out. Perhaps it was the winged cavalry that passed through yesterday? After all, the winged cavalry is our greatest enemy. With just the Protectorate of the South, there's no way we can contend against an army of 300,000 rebels, one of them said hesitantly. Everyone had hoped that the barbarians would suffer heavy losses from the landslide, but judging from the current camp, the number of soldiers walking in the camp, and the amount of smoke coming from the kitchen, it did not seem to be the case. There must be an important reason why Yu Yang would suddenly cut down the heavenly crystal and cause the entire mountain to collapse. In that case, it could only be because of the few barbarians, the famous winged cavalry. Even if the winged cavalry had passed through yesterday, they would have been completely annihilated. It's really strange that these barbarians didn't react at all. I've long heard that these barbarians believe that after they die, their souls will return to the mountains and watch over and protect their descendants with their ancestors. Therefore, they viewed life and death as a normal matter and were not afraid of it at all. From the looks of it, that is indeed the case. He's just a barbarian. The other person snorted heavily. Just in case, it's better to test it out. Qi Zixiao must still be there, as well as Shi Wanya. I'm afraid we won't be able to get away with it. The two of them looked at the camp in the distance and felt hesitant. At this moment, a Baihu from the rearguard commandery saw the two of them with binoculars. After reporting, a group of burly men wearing leather armor jumped out of the tent and ran towards the two of them. Upon seeing this group of people, the two of them first observed for a while. Then, their expressions changed drastically. These people were obviously the winged cavalry that Yu Yang had buried at the foot of the mountain. What's going on? I'm afraid that something big has happened. Let's go back quickly. The two of them looked at each other with suspicion in their eyes. Why exactly did Yu Yang cut down the heavenly crystal yesterday? A moment later, everyone gathered in Shuyang City. Do you mean that those barbarians didn't suffer any losses at all? Xie Kuan and the other two had ugly expressions on their faces. Last night, everyone was still in high spirits. They didn't expect to hear the worst news after just one night. Even if they did, the damage was very small, the two of them said. The two of us saw that the camp was very calm and had some doubts before, but after seeing those winged cavalry, we no longer had any doubts. Then Mr. Yu Yang, I'm afraid that something unforeseen has happened that we don't know about. I think I know what's going on. The man surnamed Ning from the Yun Nation had an ugly expression on his face for a while, but he gradually calmed down. Mr. Ning? Siak Kuan looked at him with a probing gaze. Although I don't know the reason, Senior Yu Yang must have been discovered. That's why the heavenly crystal was suddenly cut off, but those barbarians didn't suffer any losses. The sounds in the cave can't be heard from outside, unless someone discovered that the mountain was empty and then discovered the problem. Regardless of whether those barbarians discovered it by chance or if there was an expert among them, you don't have to think too much about it. Fortunately, we still have a backup plan in case of accidents. This time, we will definitely make sure that they won't be able to return, Mr. Ning said confidently. Now that the Wang estuary has collapsed and the mountain road has been completely buried, I'm afraid it will take them 2 days to pass through. Now, please send a general to lead an army to the hill in the north and set up camp there. Make it seem like they're going to meet them at the riverbank. When they see this army, they definitely won't think too much about whether there is a problem or not. Given the barbarians' temperament, if they see someone blocking their way and the number of soldiers is about the same as theirs and the water is not wide, they will definitely cut wood to make boats and send their army across the river to attack. At that time, we will open the river and let the water rush down. Except for the hill, everything else will be swept into the water. Naturally, most of those barbarians will become food for the fish and shrimp in the river. Hearing Mr. Ning's words, everyone calmed down. What if they discover that the water level has decreased and have suspicions? Someone asked, if those barbarians could think that much, then they wouldn't be barbarians. And no matter what, they will have to cross the river. Do you think they will go upstream to take a look? Even if they discover it, they will just open the river in advance, someone said with a smile. Everyone nodded. Indeed, even if this plan failed, there would be no loss. If it succeeded, then the harvest would be huge. However, everyone still felt that it would be difficult for the barbarians to discover that the water level had decreased and the river had become narrower. The only loss would be the crops in the north of the city. However, no one cared about those crops at this time. Thanks to Mr. Ning's strategizing and planning, even though those barbarians managed to escape once, they definitely won't be able to escape this time. Siak Kuan smiled as he stroked his beard. A just cause enjoys abundant support, while an unjust cause finds little support. Those barbarians are the enemies of you, me, the Yun Nation, the Qin Nation, and everyone in Great Xia, the youth surnamed Ning said with a smile. Well said, Mr. Ning. Siak Kuan laughed heartily. Soon after, the city was mobilized. An army of about 15,000 people left the city and headed for a hill in the north. They set up camp there and waited for the aboriginals to arrive. Chapter 539. Unlike the various thoughts going through the minds of the people in the south, the aboriginal barracks were very calm. The Empress sent the winged cavalry to open up a path on the newly formed hill. After all, the hill had collapsed and the original road was gone, so they had to open up a path that could allow carriages and horses to move forward. It didn't need to be very flat, but at least there shouldn't be too many rocks blocking the way. This was a piece of cake for the winged cavalry. The Baihu of the rearguard commandery were also sent out to investigate. In addition, there was a fierce man in the barracks who could smash a mountain with a stick. Even the ordinary soldiers had heard of this. The incident of Li Fu smashing a mountain with a stick was vividly told by some people. Coupled with the scene of the mountain collapsing and the ground splitting, Li Fu's reputation spread throughout the barracks. Furthermore, his status as the world's most powerful expert was a powerful proof and a legendary halo. In the barracks, Ren Baqian sat in front of the Empress's tent with a mischievous look on his face. As long as he learned Li Fu's stick, his days of being beaten up by the little Lolita would finally come to an end. Sir Run, where's my electric baton? Ning Kai-chin was sitting not far from him with a charming look on her face. Wait, I'll bring it to you in 2 days. Ren Baqian waved her away as if she were a fly and continued to imagine himself killing everyone after learning Li Fu's godly rod. Well, godly rod was the name Ren Baqian gave it. In some ways, it had the same effect as the finger of God. The only difference was that one targeted the death spot while the other targeted the G spot. After chasing Ning Kaichen away, Ren Baqian turned to look at the Empress in the tent. She was sitting there with a soulless look on her face. It was rare to see an Empress like this. It seemed that the power of Li Fu's stick had dealt her a huge blow. One of them was the fourth most powerful expert in the world, and the other was the most powerful expert in the world. The Empress suddenly realized that there was such a huge gap between her and the strongest expert. How could the proud and arrogant Empress accept this? Your Majesty, do you want to go back and relax? Ren Baqian got up and walked into the tent. It will take at least 1 or 2 days to clear the way out. Go back. I still have some things to think about. The Empress waved her hand. All right. Ren Baqian looked at the Empress. It seemed that she wanted to bid farewell to her homebody life and work hard to catch up. Seeing that the Empress was no longer paying attention to him, he immediately disappeared from the room. That night, Ren Baqian appeared in the Empress's tent in high spirits with 2 big bags. Although the Empress wasn't by his side, his man-wheel level strength was enough for him to run amok in most places. At least for the past 3 days, he had found a lot of fun. For example, stuffing someone's head into the toilet or using a pistol to blow up someone's anus. He was starting to like this country of Brother Black. This kind of chaos, the feeling of completely relying on one's strength to do whatever one wanted was really not bad. Unlike in China, where he had to abide by the law at all times. As soon as Ren Baqian returned to the tent with a refreshed look on his face, he was kicked out of the tent in the dark. Take the things outside. The Empress sent Ren Baqian flying with a kick. Immediately, she felt a wave of refreshment. The worries that had been troubling her for the entire day were temporarily put to the back of her mind. Ren Baqian lay on the ground, feeling rather wronged. Who did he offend? He was kicked as soon as he came back. According to the current time, the Empress should be asleep. He carried his things back to the tent. After daybreak, Ren Baqian came out of the tent and saw Ning Kaichen looking at him from afar with a charming smile on his face, which made Ren Baqian feel disgusted. Where's the Shueka? Ren Baqian asked. Ning Kaichen took out a palm-sized jade box and waved it at Ren Baqian. Ren Baqian turned around and went into the tent. After searching for a long time, he took out the electric batons, batteries, and solar chargers that he had just brought back. The 2 of them squatted at the side of the tent, as if they were carrying out some shameful transaction. In any case, we have been through thick and thin together, so I won't cheat you. These are 2 electric batons. This is a solar battery, and this is a solar panel. With these things, you can travel the world with 3 electric batons. Ren Baqian took out the things from the bag one by one and showed them to Ning Kaichen. Sir Ren, it's obviously 2 electric batons. Ning Kaichen winked. Cough, cough. Ning Kaichen's winking actually made Ren Baqian's heart palpitate with eagerness, and he quickly chanted Umitba in his heart. Ren Baqian had to admit that Ning Kaichen had become more and more seductive after his sex change. He was even more seductive than a real woman. If it was someone who didn't know about his background, they would probably be bewitched by him. Ren Baqian explained the battery, solar panel, and how to charge it in detail to Ning Kaichen. After all, a person had to be trustworthy. If he were to directly give him an electric baton, he would probably realize that it was out of battery after a day. Furthermore, Ren Baqian was somewhat responsible for his transformation. Ren Baqian now hoped that these 2 electric batons could accompany him for the rest of his life. After explaining everything to Ning Kaichen, Ren Baqian earnestly said, I guarantee a replacement and not a refund. If you have any problems, come to me and I will replace them with 2 electric batons. Ning Kaichen's eyes were almost dripping with tears. If I didn't know that Sir Ren is too fierce on the inside, I would have wanted to marry you. Forget about marrying me. Ren Baqian waved his hand. Ren Baqian only waved his hand halfway when he felt a gust of wind blow past him, following which there was a loud slap, and Ning Kaichen was getting further and further away from him. After the Empress slapped Ning Kaichen away, she snorted, turned around, and strolled back. After a while, Ning Kaichen came back with half his face swollen. He looked submissive and stopped throwing flirtatious glances. Indeed, a married man couldn't be provoked. She threw the jade box to Rinpochian, picked up one of the electric batons, and poked it into her hand. Her whole body trembled, and her face was filled with satisfaction. Then, she carried the box back to her electrocution treatment in high spirits. Rinpochian opened the box and took a look. Inside was a blood-red rhizome that looked a little like ginseng. Its body was slender and covered with many thin and long feelers. Just as he opened the box, a whiff of medicinal fragrance assailed his nostrils, invigorating his spirit. Fortunately, it's not a weird smell. Rinpochian got up and went to look for the Empress. "Your Majesty, how do I use this thing?" "It's best to decoct medicine. However, there isn't much opportunity to do so now. Just eat it directly, and it will bring out 60 to 70% of the strength of the medicine," the Empress said faintly. "Oh." Rinpochian opened his mouth and stuffed the shueka into it without any hesitation. "Why does it taste a little like carrots?" Rinpochian mumbled as he chewed. In less than 2 minutes, Rinpochian felt a huge wave of heat crashing all over his body. Rather than saying it was a wave of heat, it would be better to say it was a ball of flame. He felt his body temperature rising continuously, as if he was immersed in hot water. Every inch of his skin was red, and his eyes looked as if they were about to spit out fire. "Damn, it's cooked! It's cooked!" Rinpochian screamed in his heart. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. This kind of high temperature made his brain muddled. All the sweat glands in his body were excreting water frantically. It was as if he was taking a shower, and his clothes were drenched in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the Empress walked to his back and slapped his body more than 10 times consecutively. The raging flames in Rinpochian's body were immediately dispersed into his body. "Throw him into the water," the Empress said faintly as she walked to Rinpochian's side and sized up his expression. When he lowered his head, he saw a tent that was erected high above him. Chapter 540. At this moment, Rinpochian felt countless tiny flames covering his entire body and burning every inch of his flesh. It was as if he was hammering out the impurities in steel. The black filth that came out of his body was washed away by the river water around him. However, outsiders couldn't see this clearly because steam was coming out of Rinpochian's body as if there was a fog around him. In his mind, there was an earth-shattering change. The original world of fire began to collapse. The volcano collapsed, lava and gravel flew in all directions, and strong winds started to blow. The metal chain and the spear, which were previously comfortably soaking their feet in the lava, suddenly jumped up and drilled out of Rinpochian's head. Rinpochian was tightly tied up with a metal chain. They didn't know what this guy had done, but they didn't even have a place to hide. As for the spear, it didn't have as many requirements as the metal chain. It just floated beside Rinpochian as if it was weightless. When the river water washed over the spear, it would split into two. The Empress stood on the shore and looked at the faint mist in the water without saying a word. Although the shueka was effective, it was only effective against Rinpochian. She could easily disperse this level of medicinal power, so she naturally didn't need to worry. However, even though she said this, she still stood at the side and watched quietly. Li Fu suddenly appeared beside her, carefully sensed, and asked in surprise, "Is it really a heaven-grade weapon?" Li Fu still looked like a beggar with tattered clothes and messy hair. Although Rinpochian had asked someone to send him a new set of clothes, he didn't care. To him, it didn't make a difference whether it was new or tattered. It had already been 200 years, so how could there be any more surprises? When Rinpochian was sent here in a hurry, he noticed that there were subtle fluctuations coming from the heaven-grade weapons. He didn't expect to see such a scene. He could clearly feel that these two heaven-grade weapons had Rinpochian's aura. Ordinary people judged people based on their appearance or smell. At his level, he could already distinguish a person based on their godly soul. His appearance or smell could be changed, but his soul could never be changed. Strange. This guy is obviously a man-wheel expert, so why does he have a heaven-grade weapon? And 2. Li Fu was surprised. The Empress took 2 steps to the side and distanced herself from Li Fu. She could not shake off the stench on him. She could treat him as the best in the world, but that did not mean that she had to put up with that stench. She had no interest in answering Li Fu's question. Li Fu thought for a long time, but he couldn't think of anything. In the end, he put the matter aside. In any case, he could ask this kid when he woke up. After a long time, Ren Baqian realized that he had regained control of his body. Then, the first thing he had to face was the iron chain that tied him up. Fortunately, the moment he recovered, the iron chain and the spear drilled directly into his head. However, the 2 fellows were stunned after entering his head. Where was the original volcano? Where's the lava? Why was there only a vast desert left? How was he supposed to soak his feet? How was he supposed to soak in the bath? The only bit of fun he had was taken away. The 2 fellows were stunned for a moment. They wanted to go out and fight with Ren Baqian, but they were flicked back by the Empress's finger. Seeing that Ren Baqian was fine, the Empress flicked the 2 fellows away with her finger and went back to think about how to reach Li Fu's level. Why do you have a heaven-grade weapon? That's impossible. Li Fu couldn't wait to ask when he saw Ren Baqian come ashore. And there are 2 of them. Even I only have 1. It's probably because I'm a genius. That's why I said that it was right for you to teach me that spear technique. Only I can carry it forward and surpass the master. Ren Baqian couldn't wait to throw a few punches. His speed was much faster than before, and his punches created quite a bit of wind. He tapped his feet on the ground and immediately leaped more than 10 meters away. The heart was fire, hid the spirit, and controlled the whole body. After completing the visualization of fire, the coordination of his entire body had improved. His strength and speed had also increased significantly. Although he hadn't tested it yet, he could feel his body, and he had a feeling that he was in control of everything in his body. This was the first time he had felt this way. Furthermore, he was 1 step closer to the earth wheel level. The next 2 parts were the visualization of earth and visualization of metal. In less than a year, not only did he reach the man wheel level, but he also broke through 3 levels of visualization and reached the intermediate level of the man-will level. Ren Baqian felt that he should be a genius. That's not right. Your spear belongs to Tungyu. I've seen him once before. How did his spear fall into your hands? It seems like it has been integrated into your treasure. As long as you reach the spirit wheel level, you will be able to use it without any problems. How can this be? Li Fu kept asking as he followed Ren Baqian. Now, other than matters related to the gods and the heavens, the only thing that could attract his attention was the things that Ren Baqian had never seen or heard of. As for that metal chain, although I haven't seen it before, it doesn't belong to you. How could it be on you? It's because they realized that there was no future for them to follow their original masters, so they abandoned the dark side for the light side. They can eat, drink, and even soak their feet with me. There's no future for them to fight and kill with their original masters every day, Ren Baqian said. Impossible. Although heaven-grade weapons are condensed from spirits, they don't have their own thoughts. Li Fu said seriously. Ask them if you don't believe me. Ren Baqian spread his hands. No, there must be something wrong. Li Fu's eyebrows were wrinkled, and his unkempt hair was swaying nonstop. He couldn't figure out how such a thing could happen. He realized that he had been searching for the gods all these years and didn't know much about the various secrets. Otherwise, he would definitely be able to guess the secret. Ren Baqian performed a set of Fist of Death. The wind from his fists whistled, and each step left a deep mark on the ground. After finishing his practice, Ren Baqian looked at the marks left on the ground and was somewhat satisfied. They were almost half as deep as before. He looked up at Li Fu and saw that he was still frowning and thinking hard. Ren Baqian said, Senior, since you can't figure it out, then say no more. I will definitely figure out the reason. Li Fu reached out to stop Ren Baqian. He was the most powerful person in the world and had a better understanding of spirits than most people. It was impossible for him to think of something that others could think of. Ren Baqian was confused. Did you misunderstand something? I didn't say that I would tell you. What I meant was that since you can't figure it out, don't think about it. That's fine. Senior, when will you teach me the divine staff? Ren Baqian asked. In 2 days. I will teach you after I figure out this problem. Li Fu put his hands behind his back, lowered his head, and left with a bitter look on his face. As he walked, he kept muttering, "Why? Why exactly? How did you do it? Why?" Ren Baqian felt dizzy when he heard this. If he couldn't figure it out in this lifetime, wouldn't he have to take this move with him? Chapter 541. After another day, the road to the Shanjiang River Valley was opened. The army packed up their tents and set off. Rinpochen was still thinking about how to make Ning Kaichen stay. After all, the situation in Tianjing Basin had to be kept a secret for the time being. Rinpochen wasn't going to place his hopes on Ning Kaichen's tight-lipped mouth. In the end, he realized that Ning Kaichen didn't leave after taking the electrobaton and didn't seem to have any intention of leaving. "Are you going to stay here?" Rinpochen asked casually. "How can I go home in this state? Why don't you take me in?" Ning Kaichen wiggled his body flirtatiously. His little but wiggled coquettishly, and Rinpochen wanted to pinch him. "Ba." Rinpochen looked solemn. However, Ning Kaichen couldn't go back to the Ning family in this state. Rinpochen felt that if his son became like this, he would beat him to death. Although it was understandable for a modern person to have gender dysphoria, it was understandable for other people's sons. It was impossible for one's own son to understand, not to mention in this world. Furthermore, even though he had some friendship with Ning Kaichen, he didn't think that Ning Kaichen would help him keep this a secret. It would be best if Ning Kaichen took the initiative to stay. "If you don't have a place to go, I happen to be short of manpower. What do you think, Brother Ning?" Rinpochen thought for a while. Ning Kaichen knew a lot about Great Xia and was knowledgeable about various places. Having such a person was still useful. "Then, won't I be Sir Ren's man?" Ning Kaichen laughed hysterically. "Ow!" Ning Kaichen flew into the distance in an arc. The Empress walked away from Rinpochen's side without looking at him. She didn't even look at him. Rinpochen grimaced and felt that the Empress's whereabouts were getting stranger and stranger. It was as if she was everywhere and had thousands of clones. Furthermore, the Empress's habit of protecting her food was getting worse. Although he said this, he still felt a little sweet inside. After all, he held a considerable position in her heart, which was why she behaved this way. "My maiden heart has been melted by Her Majesty recently." Rinpochen covered his chest and sighed. Then he was kicked by the Empress from behind. Riding on the fork-horned cow, Rinpochen climbed up the rocky hill and looked ahead. There was a few miles of farmland in front of him. Behind the farmland was a river that was more than 100 meters wide. Across the river was a large plain. There were neatly tended farmlands everywhere, and it was a scene of vitality. Under the illumination of the sun, it was like a beautiful picture of the countryside. On the opposite side of the river, there was a hill that wasn't too big. An army was in formation, and their flags fluttered in the wind. Rinpochen had long known about this army. After all, they had been entrenched here for 2 days, and they even put on a defensive stance. "Do they want to stop us with just these few troops?" Shiwanya asked in disdain. "Your Majesty, the winged cavalry requests an order to attack and exterminate this rebel army to show the might of Dao's army." Gong Zheng requested for the order. "Approved." Shiwanya, "Send someone to attack together with the winged cavalry," the Empress instructed. "Yes." The two of them excitedly went to prepare. Just as Rinpochen descended to the plain below, a Baihu came to report, "Sir, the water level of Li River has dropped a lot since the last time I was here." "Oh." Rinpochen glanced at this Baihu. He had come from the south to seek shelter, and his surname should be Qiao. If it was just a drop in the water level, he wouldn't have come to report like this. He was afraid that there was a problem. "How much has it dropped?" Rinpochen asked. "It has dropped by at least 1 meter. Some of the shallower riverbanks on both sides have been exposed," the Baihu said in a deep voice. Rinpochen immediately became pensive. Although he didn't know much about this, he knew that there was something wrong with the water level dropping by 1 meter in a month. It would be fine if it was a small river, but Li River was at least 100 meters wide. Such a wide river had a lot of water. A drop of 1 meter meant that the water level was much lower. Sir, I was thinking about this before. I guess that the water level dropped because of the lack of rain these days. Another Baihu came over and laughed. This person's surname was Su, and he came from the south. Oh, Rinpochian responded faintly and asked the Baihu who had made the report, "What do you think is the reason?" "I don't know. What Baihu Su said is possible, but the water level has dropped too much, so it's a little strange." That Baihu whispered, "Sir, you can send someone upstream to take a look?" "That's right." Rinpoche nodded and said, "Guards, my lord." The two guards beside him hurriedly urged their mounts forward. "Take him down." Rinpoche pointed at the Baihu with the surname Su and ordered, "Sir." Su Baihu's facial expression changed drastically. "If I said something that I shouldn't have, please forgive me." Su Baihu didn't dare to resist and was brought to Rinpoche by the two guards with a miserable look on his face. "I heard that we have to offer sacrifices to the sea god in the sea and the river god in the river. It's fine if nothing happens, but if something happens, we will chop him up and offer him as a sacrifice to the river god," Rinpoche said faintly. Su Baihu's facial expression immediately changed. "Sir, I didn't mean it. Don't be nervous. If nothing happens, you will naturally be fine." Rinpoche smiled amiably. "Unless you are certain that something will happen?" Some of the Baihu in the surroundings were shocked when they heard what Rinpoche said. "Detain him and keep an eye on him. If he escapes, I will offer you too as a sacrifice to the river god." Rinpoche told the guards to detain Su Baihu and went to see the Empress. "Your Majesty, ask Protector General Shi and Captain Gong not to rush into action. Let's go ahead and take a look first." "What did you discover?" "A little speculation. I want to see it with my own eyes," Rinpoche said. "All right." The Empress knew that Rinpoche must have discovered something for him to say this. A moment later, she called Shuanya, Zhongshan, and Gongzheng over and went to the riverbank to take a look. Rinpoche stood by the riverbank and looked around. He immediately saw what he wanted to see. "Your Majesty, Protector General Shi, Deputy Protector General Zhong, and Captain Gong, take a look." The surface of the river was originally nearby, but there are still traces of it here. This shows that the water level here has always been very stable. At this moment, the water level has dropped by a full meter here. "What did you discover?" the Empress asked directly. Rinpoche pointed to the two bridges that had been cut off and said, "There was originally a bridge here, but the other party didn't cut it to prevent us from crossing the river. They wanted us to cut wood and build boats to cross the river. If the other party built a dam in advance to store water and waited for us to cross the river before breaking the dam to release the water, our army would naturally suffer heavy losses when the water rushed down. Your Majesty, we will know once we send someone upstream to check." "What Sir Rin said makes sense," Gongzheng immediately said and then laughed. "However, this person underestimated our winged cavalry. Do we still need to build boats in this river? As long as we throw the tree trunks into the river, we can cross it. Then, the winged cavalry will attack the enemy. Currently, there are 700 winged cavalry warriors, and we won't be able to easily lose them," Rinpoche said. The number of winged cavalry warriors had reached a very dangerous level. If they were to lose more of them, it would be difficult to fight the following battles. "Gongzheng, send someone upstream to check," the Empress said. At this moment, on a hill opposite them, a young man was watching dozens of winged cavalry warriors rush upstream from the river. Had these barbarians discovered them? It seemed like they were smarter than he had thought. However, that was all they could do. Everyone thought that he wanted to break the dam and attack them while they were crossing the river. In fact, according to his plan, even the two sides of the river would be swept away. This included the current location of the Aboriginals. Unless you return to the mountain now, it will be too late when you discover the surging river. Even if I can't completely wipe you out, I can at least make you lose half of your troops. Losing half of your troops and losing your rations, let's see how you're going to fight this battle. Chapter 542. Rinpoche and the others were still waiting on the riverbank, while some soldiers went to cut down trees nearby. Whether it was building boats or setting up camp, this was necessary preparation. Rinpoche used a pair of binoculars to observe the other side and realized that the other side had been waiting quietly and hadn't made any big moves. They should have seen it when he sent people upstream to check, right? It didn't matter if the plan failed. Did the other side still have a backup plan? What could it be? Rinpoche pondered for a while, but couldn't figure it out. He wasn't good at this kind of strategy and couldn't figure out what the other side was thinking. In any case, they were completely stronger than the other side, and the only thing the other side could do was to think of ways to weaken their forces. Otherwise, using a group of new soldiers and garrison troops to face the Protectorate of the South and the winged cavalry, whose weakest members were man-wheel experts, would be no different from courting death. The other side couldn't possibly think that a group of new soldiers could defeat the Aboriginal army, right? Even if their numbers were 20 or 30 times greater. If war was simply a game of accumulating numbers, Deo would have been destroyed 100 times over. Therefore, as long as they were careful, didn't step into the trap, and avoided too much damage to their troops, they would definitely win this rebellion. They would deal with it as it came. Rinpoche remembered someone saying that every outstanding commander was a coward. As such, they would think carefully, consider every aspect, and not miss a single detail. Rinpoche felt that this made sense. He wasn't timid at all, so he was destined not to be an outstanding commander. Rinpoche turned to look for Li Fu and quickly found Qin Yun's sword and Zhuocheng. Now, the two of them were like King Kong on the left and right. Li Fu ignored the two of them and kept thinking about what was going on. Why were there heaven-grade weapons? Why were there two of them? Senior, there's an army blocking the way ahead. Why don't you capture the commander of that army and destroy them? Then we can go back and study the fire arrows as soon as possible. Rinpoche rode his horse to Li Fu's side. Li Fu didn't even raise his head. His face was full of wrinkles as he continued to ponder. Rinpoche didn't mind at all. He didn't expect Li Fu to become a fighter just because of his words. Even though he looked a little stupid, he was still the best in the world. At this moment, Rinpoche suddenly heard a thunderous sound from afar. Is it going to rain? Rinpoche raised his head and looked at the sky in the distance. If it rained, the water level in the river would definitely surge, and the current would become rapid. When that happened, it would be more troublesome to cross the river. However, as far as he could see, the sky was clear and there was no sign of rain. At this moment, chaos broke out ahead. Flood! Flood! Quickly report to the Protector General and His Majesty. Retreat quickly, many soldiers shouted. Rinpoche raised his eyebrows, leaped up from the back of his mount, and finally saw the scene in the distance. In the distance, a white line was rushing towards them. In front of the white line, dozens of small dots were running wildly in their direction like huskies that had lost their reins. F***CK. Rinpoche really wanted to curse. So this was the other party's plan. The other party was not waiting for them to cross the river to burst the dam. The other party had accumulated enough water to flood both sides of the river. It was no wonder that the other party was not in a hurry. Even though they knew that they had sent people upstream to investigate, they did not take any action. The Empress and Shi Wanya were faster than him. They had already leaped into the air and saw what was happening. They immediately shouted, "Everyone, retreat to the mountain and throw away everything. Everyone, retreat quickly. Don't panic. Quickly retreat to the mountain in order of distance," Shi Wanya shouted. Rinpoche landed on the back of the fork-horned cow and looked at the hill next to him. The rear of the army was close to the hill, but some people in front were already close to the river and were at least 5 kilometers away from the hill. With the speed of a man-wheel expert, it would take about 3 minutes to cover 5 kilometers. The white line that they saw just now would take at least 3 minutes to reach this place. It seemed like they could make it in time, but the problem was that there were nearly 10,000 people gathered in such a large area, and it was impossible to escape. Just like now, Rinpoche looked around and saw that the soldiers near the hill had quickly retreated up the mountain, but the area around him was in a mess. Even if Shi Wanya repeatedly shouted for them not to panic, chaos was inevitable. It would be fine if he had more time, but there was no time now. Whether it was water or fire, they couldn't wait for anyone. Kill! At this moment, a battle cry was heard from the hill again. An army of about 1,000 people rushed over from that direction and was met with a rain of arrows before they even got close. It's not an army. It's a martial arts practitioner. Even though Rinpoche was far away, he could immediately tell their identities from their movements. It was almost impossible to ambush an army nearby, but it was entirely possible for a group of 1,000 martial arts practitioners to approach quietly. Damn it! Are the people from the rearguard commandery eating sh*t? Rinpoche was furious. The situation here was already chaotic, and the appearance of an enemy force on the hill made it even slower for them to return to the hill. If this continued, there was no telling how many people would die in this flood. Let's go. The Empress landed beside Rinpoche, grabbed him with one hand, and charged toward the enemy force that suddenly appeared on the hill. Senior Li Fu, Rinpoche shouted down at this moment. Your Majesty, look for Li Fu. Otherwise, even if we kill the people on the hill, I don't know how many people will be washed away by the current speed. After hearing Rinpoche's words, the Empress looked for Li Fu in the air, made a turn, and landed beside him. Senior, please help. Rinpoche cupped his hands at Li Fu. I'm not going to get involved in the affairs of you little guys. Li Fu looked at him and shook his head. If we lose this battle, the South will be in chaos. Outside, there are the Qin Nation, the Yun Nation, and Great Xia eyeing us covetously. If there's an internal rebellion, how will we have the ability to develop technology and manufacture rockets? Senior, please help us. You don't have to attack the rebel army. Just ask for help from these soldiers. When we get back, I will make a kite for you to fly in the sky. Rinpoche said quickly. Li Fu's previous strike had shocked him. If there was anyone who could turn the tide at this time, it would be this person. Li Fu hesitated for a while before nodding and saying, Fine, I will help you. Get the people to hide behind me. Rinpoche was overjoyed and quickly said to the Empress, Your Majesty, get those who can't return to the hill to hide behind you. Without another word, the Empress cupped her hands at Li Fu as a gesture of gratitude. She then got everyone to gather behind Li Fu. After everyone had gathered, the Empress carried Rinpoche and landed on a tree, closely watching Li Fu's every move. At this moment, the rebel army on the hill threw down a pile of corpses. After a short fight, only a small portion of them ran to the rear. Their goal was to delay the aboriginal army for a moment, and they had achieved their goal. Rinpoche looked ahead and saw that the surging tide was only 100 meters away from them. A huge wave that was more than 2 meters tall rushed toward them with great power and rumbling sounds. Li Fu was facing this wave with his staff, and behind him were thousands of soldiers squeezed together. In less than a dozen breaths, the wave was in front of everyone. Li Fu stared at the wave in front of him with a solemn face. The dragon turtle rod in his hand instantly became 2 meters long, and he pointed it forward. Boom! The wave in front of Li Fu exploded in a radius of dozens of meters. Li Fu was satisfied with the effectiveness of this strike. According to his estimation, this strike should be able to create a radius of 100 meters. However, the next second, the flood came crashing down. Li Fu was shocked. How could the power of this strike be so weak? Following which, he shook out a sky full of rod shadows and pointed them in front of him. At this point, the waves separated from where Li Fu stood and surrounded the soldiers behind him. The soldiers at the outermost layer could clearly see the countless fish in the water. Rinpoche and the Empress could see clearly from the tree that Li Fu didn't just use one strike, but countless strikes. Countless rod shadows filled the space in front of him. The flood was split apart in front of him and pushed outwards by the rod shadows that he used to point at both sides. The water collided with the water outside and was squeezed together again. However, it just so happened to let the soldiers behind Li Fu pass. From a distance, everyone looked like a reef standing in the water, allowing the water to wash them. Having the experience of smashing a mountain with one strike, Li Fu's rod shadows that filled the sky and split the water 100 meters apart didn't seem very amazing. After all, he only used one strike to smash a mountain, but now he used countless strikes. The area in front of Li Fu was completely covered in rod shadows. However, Li Fu's control of power could be said to be at the peak. He was able to make the flood avoid the soldiers and merge 1 meter behind them. Such control was indeed the best in the world. The eyes of the Baihu, standing on the mountain, Qin Yun's sword, and the others behind Li Fu were glowing. At this time, Li Fu, who was admired by everyone, wanted to curse out loud. Damn it, why has my strength dropped so much? This is like seeing a ghost. I thought that I could split the river with one strike, but it took more than 100 strikes to do so. I have to use all my strength to barely protect so many people. If this goes on, I won't be able to hold on for long. Chapter 543. When the water flooded the area, the young man on the opposite hill chuckled. Although he couldn't see clearly from afar, at least half of the enemy didn't go up the hill, which was similar to what he had expected. Without half of their military strength, it would be very difficult for Dayo to take down these people from Tianjin Basin, unless they mobilized their military strength from other places. They didn't have much military strength in the Qin nation. Hongwu couldn't be moved either, as Great Xia was still eyeing them covetously. In that case, only the Yun nation could be moved. This allowed Zhu Wuzhen to heave a sigh of relief. However, there was something strange. Why didn't those people escape just now? Instead, they gathered together. Very soon, he couldn't laugh anymore. He saw that there was a place in the middle of the floodwater with high waves splashing up, blocking his view. That scene was like boundless seawater crashing against a reef. He had seen this scene since he was young and had been deeply imprinted in his mind. Could it be that there was someone who could block the floodwater like a reef? Then he laughed. Even Qi Zixiao could only protect a few people in such a flood. Just now, there were at least thousands of soldiers gathered there. Even the most powerful expert in the world couldn't do anything. It was just that the splashing water was a little big, and he couldn't let it go. At this time, Li Fu had separated the floodwater, and the people below were temporarily safe. Ren Baqian finally had the spare energy to look around. What he saw was a vast expanse of water. This side of the river was flooded, and many places on the other side of the river were flooded as well. For example, the vicinity of the hill was flooded as well. As for the distance, it seemed that the terrain was a little higher than here, so it wasn't a big deal. Ren Baqian looked around and began to feel that the hill and the people on it were a little too much of an eyesore. Suddenly, an idea came to Ren Baqian's mind. He first turned to look at the Empress, who was concentrating on Li Fu's rod. He didn't know if she was comprehending it. "Your Majesty," Ren Baqian called out softly. He was afraid that there would be an epiphany in this world and that people would disturb her, so he kept his voice very low. If the Empress was really comprehending the god's rod, his soft voice shouldn't disturb her, right? "What's the matter?" He didn't expect the Empress to immediately ask. "Your Majesty, can you send me to the top of the hill? I have an idea." The Empress glanced at him, carried Ren Baqian, and pounced toward the direction of the hill. Every time they were about to fall into the water, she would slap the surface of the water with her palm and bounce up high. Pillars of water exploded on the surface of the river behind the two of them. Ren Baqian searched around the hill and found his bag first. These things were in the custody of the bodyguards, and he had brought them along with him. Then he took out a few skunk bombs. "Protector General Zong, can you shoot this thing at their hill?" Ren Baqian found Zong Shun, pointed at the hill, and asked, "Sir Ren, what are you doing?" Zong Shun was stunned and didn't know what Ren Baqian wanted to do. "Protector General Zong, can you do it?" "It's possible. As long as I tie this to the arrow, I will be able to step on the water and reach the river." Zong Shun muttered. "That's good." Ren Baqian sneered. "Come on, let's hurt each other. Tie this to the arrow. When you want to shoot, pull out the ring and shoot directly. You must be fast. Don't delay. After pulling the ring, this thing can't stay in your hand for more than 2 breaths." Ren Baqian didn't want Zong Shun to end up like Shi Hu. Zong Shun would fight him to the death. All right, teach me. Zhongshun took the skunk bombs from Run Baqian's hands and then asked someone to bring him a bow and arrows. The bow that Zhongshun used was made entirely of metal. It was half the height of a person, and the bowstring was as thick as a thumb. People would even believe that it was a city-guarding crossbow. An ordinary practitioner wouldn't be able to pull it at all. Zhongshun tied the skunk bombs to the arrows, changed his position, and adjusted his center of gravity. Then, he carried the arrows on his back and asked someone to bring 2 tree trunks that were as thick as an Aboriginal man's arm. They were chopped into 6 sections and clamped between his arms. Then, he leaped dozens of meters high from the hill. When he was about to land, he threw a section of the tree trunk at the landing point and did this. After a while, Zhongshun arrived at the original position of the river. After jumping up, he knocked an arrow and shot at the opposite side. He shot 3 arrows in a row. After landing, he bounced up and shot another 3 arrows. Then, when he landed, there was no place for him to stand on, and he plunged into the water. However, this current wasn't a threat to him. In the blink of an eye, he jumped out of the water with 2 big fish in his hands and threw them back when he was about to fall into the water. The 2 fish had already been pinched to death by him and were just enough for him to use as footholds. After the 2 fish, Zhongshun fell into the water again and caught 2 more fish to use as footholds. Finally, he returned to the hill. At this time, Rinpochian was looking at the chaos on the opposite hill with a pair of binoculars and smiling happily. Sure enough, the pain of others was the source of his happiness. Are you guys going to jump into the water or endure it? It's better to endure it. I could still kill them again later. 2 minutes ago, Zhongshun had attracted the attention of the other party when he jumped up. Seeing Zhongshun throw the driftwood as footholds and jump toward them, the young man muttered to himself, "What are you trying to do?" It's Zhongshun, the Deputy Protector General of the Protectorate of the South. No matter what he's trying to do, he's only one person. The 2 of us are confident that we can protect Mr. Ning, the 2 elders beside the young man said as they looked ahead. Although they couldn't defeat him, they could still escape with him. This person had an important status, and his military tactics and strategies were admirable. If they wanted to defeat the Aboriginals, they needed to borrow his strength. No matter what, they couldn't let him die here. Thank you for your trouble, seniors. However, I don't think he's here to kill the general and seize the flag, right? Mr. Ning smiled. After he finished speaking, Zhongshun jumped into the river, jumped tens of meters high, and knocked an arrow. Be careful, Mr. Ning. The 2 of them pulled Mr. Ning behind them and stared at Zhongshun in the air. Then, 3 arrows shot into the crowd. The other party didn't seem to have a target. One of the arrows wasn't far from him, but it wasn't aimed at him. Mr. Ning didn't think that the other party's target was him because he was dressed like an ordinary soldier. There weren't any important people in the other 2 arrows' locations. What was he trying to do? This question popped up in Mr. Ning's mind. Then, the smell of 100 years of aging and 82 years of old feces and other indescribable odors entered his nostrils. Immediately, he felt as if someone had hit him in the head with a hammer, and he saw stars. Then, he punched him in the chest, causing his lungs to contract, and he couldn't breathe in any air. Poison. Just as Mr. Ning said this word, he vomited. Then, the violent vomiting made him vomit out everything he had eaten. He even wanted to vomit out his heart, spleen, lungs, and kidneys. Then, his vision turned black, and he fainted. The faces of the 2 old men beside him turned green. When they smelled this odor, they immediately recalled their tragic experience. The smell was much stronger than before, and it was even more powerful. Not good. Retreat quickly. The 2 of them carried the fainted Mr. Ning and fled into the distance without looking back. Halfway there, they fell into the water. Mr. Ning woke up as soon as he fell into the water. Then, he choked on a mouthful of water. When he was lifted to the surface and smelled the pungent odor, he fainted again. As for the others, they felt like dying at this moment. Their eyes were seeing stars as they looked at the flood around them. To jump or not to jump? They had originally prepared a water attack for the other party, but now they were completely trapped here. Chapter 544. The flood lasted for almost an hour before gradually receding. When the water level began to drop to his waist, Li Fu could no longer hold on. Fortunately, ordinary soldiers could completely resist the current momentum of the water. Ren Baqian was shocked when he saw Li Fu. Li Fu's hair and beard were stuck to his face. His face was pale, and his eyes were lifeless. It was as if he had fought for 3 days and 3 nights and had been squeezed dry. He no longer had the demeanor of the world's #1 expert. "Senior, are you all right?" Ren Baqian asked cautiously. "Brat, you've harmed this old man. Stay away from this old man. Don't talk to this old man," Li Fu said weakly. Ren Baqian suddenly realized that the world's most powerful expert was still a human. In the beginning, Li Fu's rod that could shatter a mountain made him feel as if he had seen a god. Seeing him in such a sorry state, for some reason, she felt secretly pleased. Although this feeling was unfounded, the other party had helped to protect thousands of soldiers. However, Ren Baqian was relieved that a deity had become immortal. After all, Li Fu was too strong, so strong that people could only look up to him. Even the Empress couldn't compare. "Senior, please have a good rest first. I'll get you some nourishing things like saber-toothed tiger penis, panda penis, wolfberry, epimedium, and desert cistanche to help you recover." Ren Baqian smiled eagerly. Where did all this nonsense come from? Li Fu was so angry that he blew his beard and glared at him. He might not understand other things, but how could he not understand tiger penises? He had not been close to a woman for more than 200 years. If he ate the whip of a sharp-toothed tiger, how could he sleep well? After seeing that Li Fu had found a place to lie down and rest, Ren Baqian looked for the Empress and said, "Your Majesty, although the soldiers are fine, the military supplies are all gone. Other than the winged cavalry's mounts, all that was left were the cows and goats that were sent over from Gu City. These cows and sheep had been at the back, but they were driven to the hill in time. However, meat was only eaten together with grains before the war. If the entire army ate as much as they wanted, it would only take 1 meal. There are some in the city." She then called for Shuanya and said, "Get the soldiers to chop down trees and build rafts to cross the river." He then called Gongzheng and said, "Get the winged cavalry to get ready. When the water recedes, the winged cavalry will cross the river first. My request to you is that you don't need to defeat the enemy. You just need to stand firm. If they don't attack, don't take the initiative to attack." Yes. After waiting for another 2 hours, the water began to recede. The original farmland was completely covered with mud, and a large number of fish were left on both sides of the shore. The big ones were even 3 to 4 meters long and had a mouth full of sharp teeth. Ren Baqian hurriedly ordered his men to collect the fish. At the very least, they would be able to roast the fish for dinner. If not for the fact that all the supplies were lost, and even the pot for stewing soup was gone, everyone could still have a meal of fish soup to drink. It was a pity that the martial artists of the pugilistic world who attacked just now were either dead or had fled. None of them were left alive. Otherwise, he could have found someone to test the poison on. However, most of the fish should be fine. He just had to pay attention to those that looked strange. When the shore on this side was completely exposed, there was still about a meter of water on the other side. However, the troops on the hill could not wait any longer. They jumped into the water and ran far away. However, the smell was still attached to their bodies and could not be washed away by water. A group of people in the water despised each other. In the end, the whole army scattered like a line of soldiers and ran towards the city in the distance. When the opposite shore was exposed, the winged cavalry began to prepare to cross the river. At this time, the water began to weaken. Like Zhongshun just now, the winged cavalry threw a piece of wood into the water. Dozens of people worked together, and there was a piece of driftwood every 5 to 6 meters. It was as if there were 3 floating bridges in the water. Then, they jumped across one by one. Occasionally, a few idiots stepped on both ends of the driftwood and immediately fell into the water. By the time they grabbed onto the driftwood and got up, they had already been used as a human ladder by the people behind them. They suffered countless kicks before they reached the shore with bruised noses and swollen faces. After that, he used 7 or 8 tree trunks to form a wooden raft, which was connected together to form a floating bridge in the water. By the time the sky turned dark, everyone was already on the other side of the shore. During this period, a Baihu sent a message. It was that the army that had escaped had reached the city in front, but they were not allowed to enter. Instead, they went around the city and went to the rear. Otherwise, the smell of those people alone would have reduced the fighting strength of the defending army by 30%. At the same time, the fighting strength of the soldiers attacking the city would also be affected. Not everyone could remain unmoved in the face of such a fresh smell. After everyone reached the opposite shore, the fish collected from both sides and 1/3 of the cattle and sheep were enough for everyone to have a full meal. The army began to advance during the night, and when the moon was in the middle of the sky, they reached the vicinity of the city that they had seen earlier. Your Majesty, this is Shuiyang City. This is the territory of the southern metropolis. It is said that Xie of the southern metropolis is in the city, and there are at least 100,000 soldiers in the city. Ren Baqian stood beside the Empress and pointed to the city in front. Under the illumination of the torches, the top of the city wall was filled with soldiers armed with bows and arrows, swords, and spears. It was full of an austere atmosphere. On top of the city gate, a few people who looked like generals were looking in the direction of the crowd. They clearly knew that the aboriginal army was already here, but even with the help of the moonlight, they couldn't see too far. They could only vaguely see some silhouettes and hear the sounds transmitted by the wind. They could hear and know where they were, but they couldn't see anything. This made the people on the city wall feel a little depressed. On the other hand, the aboriginals could see everything clearly from the top of the city wall. Passed down the order to rest for 30 minutes and then attack the city overnight. The Empress instructed Shi Wanya. Ren Baqian also distributed the grenades that they had brought this time. In the end, there were only 60 to 70 things that looked like smoke bombs. Ren Baqian looked at these things and immediately laughed. Previously, when he bought the grenades, he brought them along with him, thinking that they might come in handy. He didn't expect them to be put to use so soon. He found Gong Zheng and instructed him on how to use them so that he could distribute them. After 30 minutes, Shi Wanya began to organize the soldiers. His loud voice pierced through the night sky, causing the people on the city wall to immediately become nervous. They're going to attack. Archers, get ready. Boiling oil. A person who looked like a general on the city wall ordered. The boiling oil that was previously boiling at the top of the city wall was immediately moved to the top of the city wall. Everyone's eyes were fixed on the darkness below the city wall. They could vaguely see silhouettes swaying in the darkness, muffled footsteps approaching the city wall, and loud shouts could be heard continuously. Each and every soldier nervously clenched the weapons in their hands, even though this didn't give them much sense of security. After these days of propaganda, everyone knew what kind of people were in the darkness. They were the savage barbarians. Everyone believed that the city would be massacred after it was breached. Whether it was for themselves or for their families, they had to go all out today. Even if they had to die, they had to take a bite out of the other party. The general at the top of the city wall picked up a torch and threw it forward, immediately illuminating a tall figure. Shoot! Everyone immediately shot the arrows in their hands in the direction that they had seen just now. A group of people who had emptied their bows immediately switched positions with the people behind them, and another batch of arrows rained down on the darkness. In the darkness, a large expanse of saber light also lit up, forming a mass of light and shadow that blocked the arrows. Hundreds of people quickly rushed to the bottom of the city wall. At the same time, dozens of cylindrical objects were thrown toward the top of the city wall. "Lower your heads," Gong Zheng shouted, and all the winged cavalry warriors immediately lowered their heads. Bang! Different from the explosion of a grenade, there was a loud sound that was accompanied by a strong light that exploded in the air. It was a blinding area of up to 30 meters, and it was in the middle of the night. Everyone was staring at the darkness closely, and the sudden flash caused even more damage. More than half of the people on the top of the city wall who were staring down only felt their vision go white, and then they couldn't see anything. This included some of the martial artists on the top of the city wall. All of them covered their eyes and howled, "I can't see anything." However, not only could many people not see anything, but they also couldn't hear anything. In addition to the intense light that reached up to 1 million candelas, the explosion of the flash grenade also produced a noise that was 170 to 180 decibels at close range, causing some people to temporarily go deaf. Suddenly, they couldn't see or hear anything, and it caused a huge panic on the city wall. Due to the sudden fear, many people squeezed and bumped into each other. One by one, boiling pots of oil were knocked over, causing even more chaos. Many people even fell from the top of the city wall in panic. At this moment, hundreds of small melons were thrown onto the top of the city wall. Boom, boom, boom. A series of explosions and flames immediately rang out on the city wall. After that, 700 winged cavalry warriors jumped onto the city wall and used their saber lights to create a rain of blood. Previously, the rebel army had made all kinds of preparations and plans. Even though the landslide and water attack strategies had failed, they still had a certain level of confidence. They had enough troops to defend the city. Chapter 545. When the winged cavalry attacked the top of the city wall, the city commander's residence was brightly lit. Siakoin sat at the head of the table with a glass of wine in one hand, looking like he was deep in thought. Earlier in the afternoon, he had received news from his scouts that the Aboriginals did not lose more than half of their forces, as they had expected. Instead, they suffered almost no losses. This made him unable to understand how the Aboriginals had managed to do it. Subsequently, he guessed that the Aboriginals would likely attack the city overnight. After all the supplies had been washed away. If they didn't attack the city, they could only retreat to Jiang Bay. From the way the Aboriginals crossed the river, it was clear that they would not retreat. In that case, the rations in the city would be something that the Aboriginals had to obtain. In that case, there was an 80% chance that the Aboriginals would attack the city overnight. Thus, he was already prepared. Even though the ancient race was strong, their numbers were too few. In total, there were only 10,000 of them. There were 100,000 soldiers in the city. Rao Yu and Tai Zai had returned to the other two cities in the afternoon to prepare for war. As long as they could hold on for another day, another 200,000 soldiers would arrive. At that time, he would like to see how the 10,000 Aboriginals would win against the 300,000 soldiers. Even 300,000 cows and sheep would make their hands go limp, let alone 300,000 soldiers. Thinking of this, Siekuan drank the wine in his cup and asked casually, "Is Mr. Ning still in the room?" "Yes." The attendant had a smile on his face. Mr. Ning had already taken a bath for the entire afternoon, but the smell could only be said to have lessened a little. Now he was directly soaking in the bucket. He had to change the water every half an hour to make himself feel less smelly. "Don't be slow," Siekuan said faintly. Although neither of his plans had caused any harm to the Aboriginals, he felt that this was the will of the heavens. At the very least, if he were in the position of the Aboriginals, regardless of whether it was a landslide or a water attack, it would be enough to make him suffer heavy casualties. This was especially true for the landslide stratagem. First, he would use rolling logs, rocks, armies, and exotic beasts to draw the enemy's attention, while in reality, he would hollow out the belly of the mountain. To be able to come up with such a stratagem was enough to prove his strength. Needless to say, his identity was special. If they wanted to leave Tianjing Basin after winning, they would need the help of the Yun Nation. Siekuan pondered for a moment. Just then, a guard came in and said, "Everyone, the Aboriginals are attacking." "Got it." Siekuan nodded. The ancient race's attack was inevitable. Now, they only needed to defend for a day, and they would win. At this moment, a series of explosions came from the direction of the city wall. Siekuan listened attentively. His expression did not change as he continued to wait for further news. In less than 10 minutes, there was a series of explosions outside. At the same time, someone hurriedly reported, "Everyone, the city wall has fallen. The entire eastern wall has been occupied by the barbarians. The pacifying barbarian general is dead." What? Siakoin was shocked. His favorite moon reflection cup fell to the ground and broke into pieces, but he couldn't care less. How long has it been? The entire eastern city wall was occupied by the ancient race? How could he be so fast? What did Shweli do? However, before he could recover from his shock, another urgent report arrived. Report: the east gate has been opened, and the aboriginal army is charging in. General Junbei is leading his men to stop them. Report: General Dingbei has been captured by the enemy. Report: Yidao sect's leader and everyone else are dead. Report: the entire Liangshan sect is dead. Report: Scenic Mountain Rain Monastery and Wind Listening Monastery are all dead. Report: the enemy is attacking the city lord's mansion. A series of urgent reports made Siakoin's face pale, and beads of sweat rolled down his back. How was this possible? How could they be so fast? Someone informed the north and south barracks to quickly intercept the enemy. Siakoin shouted, "Get someone to go to the granary in the west of the city and wait for my orders. If they can't hold on, burn the granary," Siakoin said while gritting his teeth. "Get someone to send the young master and young mistress out of the city and bring the madams to the hall." At this time, Rinpochian rode a goat through the city gate. It was the kind of giant goat that the winged cavalry rode. In front of him was the army of the Protectorate of the South that was charging forward like a tidal wave. In the beginning, they used flash grenades and grenades to make more than half of the defenders on the eastern wall lose their combat power. After quickly occupying the city wall, they opened the gate for the army of the Protectorate of the South to attack. This really caught the enemy off guard. In a short period of time, they cleared one side of the city wall and quickly advanced into the city. However, after being caught off guard at the beginning, the enemy began to counterattack, which slowed down the advancement of the army of the Protectorate of the South. In particular, the entire army was crowded on 3 streets, which made their advance even slower. Fortunately, the weakest Aboriginal soldiers were at the man-will level, and ordinary houses couldn't stop them at all. Many troops jumped onto the houses and advanced quickly. After reaching the left and right side of the enemy, they jumped down from the roofs and landed in the middle of the enemy troops to kill them. Occasionally, there would be a little accident. Rinpochian saw with his own eyes a group of people jump onto a house next to them and then disappear. After a long time, a group of people came out of the house dejectedly. "Someone," Rinpochian called out. "Sir, get the people from the rearguard commandery to spread out and look for the enemy's granary. Don't let them burn or poison it," Rinpochian ordered. As the order was passed down, many Baihu behind Rinpochian rushed into the nearby houses, asked for the location of the granary, and headed toward the west of the city. Rinpochian followed the army from afar and slowly moved forward. The corpses under his feet began to increase, and blood stained the entire street. The smell of blood was everywhere. Broken limbs and blood sprayed on the walls were everywhere. "Umipa!" Rinpochian sincerely chanted the name of Buddha from his mouth. He didn't know if he would go to hell if he died, because he couldn't even bear to kill a chicken. At this moment, the door of the house next to him suddenly opened, and a few people who looked like commoners rushed toward Rinpochian with kitchen knives made of bone. "Go to hell, you thieves!" The eyes of these commoner men were filled with fear, and their faces were distorted with extreme fear. However, they still refused to stop. The barbarians didn't leave anyone alive. If the city was breached, they would massacre the entire city. This was what Siakoin had repeatedly instilled in them these days. In this era, they had almost no channels to get information from the outside world other than what they heard from the mouths of others and the billboards in various parts of the city. Coupled with Siakoin's repeated indoctrination, they were deeply convinced. Therefore, when they saw Rinpochian, who looked like a high-ranking official, these commoners couldn't help but rush out. As they rushed out, a few young people also rushed out from another direction. "Kill them all," Rinpochian said faintly, but he frowned. The guards beside him lit up their knives, and more than a dozen commoners who rushed over immediately spat out blood and fell to the ground. Stupid, you could have lived, Rinpochian muttered to himself. It was hard to tell if his tone was filled with pity or something else. He then got off his mount, walked into a house next to him, and kicked open the door of another room. After sizing it up, he said, "Search and see if there are any survivors. Search the other houses where people came out as well." In just a moment, more than a dozen men, women, and children were thrown in front of Rinpochian, and 2 of them had their arms chopped off. All of them looked at the man in front of them with fear and hatred. "Why did you attack?" Rinpochian asked faintly. It was obvious that the army was fighting and not harassing the commoners. Why did they resist? Why did they attack him? "You bunch of bastards. If you don't die, we will." A middle-aged man who had 1 arm chopped off cursed. He knew that he was going to die. "Why do you say that?" Rinpochian squatted in front of him and asked calmly. "You will die a horrible death." That man continued to curse. "Wrong answer." Rinpochian got up, kicked the man to the ground, and stepped on his neck. The sound of bones breaking could be heard by everyone. "Next, who can tell me why exactly?" Rinpochian looked down at the crowd and asked. After a while, Rinpochian got the information he wanted, turned around, and walked slowly along the long street. These rebels really dragged everyone down with them. It had to be said that Siekuan's brainwashing was quite successful. These fools, sir, these people, kill them. Chapter 546. Sir, run, it's time to leave. There's an army coming from behind. It's the enemy. As Rinpochian walked on the street, endless shouts of killing could be heard in front of him. A guard suddenly ran to Rinpochian's side, lifted him, and placed him on his mount. There were 18 other guards around him. There were supposed to be 20 of them, but Sure, who was placed on leave by Rinpochian and was still staying in Jiangbei. They are civilians. How dare they drag civilians out and kill them? Your parents and relatives are all in the city. If Shuiyang City is breached, everyone will die. Even if you have to risk your life, you must kill all these barbarians. Even if you don't have any weapons, you must take a bite out of them. Behind Rinpochian, shouts of anger or mixed with other emotions could be heard. However, these words and the corpses as proof were quite effective in boosting morale. Rinpochian rummaged through his bag on his mount. There was a pistol, an AK, more than 100 bullets, a few grenades, and a few skunk bombs. Unfortunately, his gun was in Goose City, and he didn't have enough bullets. Otherwise, he could have staged a 1 versus 10-0-0-0 show. Looking back, he could already see a tidal wave of soldiers surging in his direction. Rinpochian picked up a skunk bomb, pulled off the safety, and threw it toward the rear. "Oh no, it's poisonous." The tidal wave of soldiers panicked. "Don't be afraid. This isn't poison. It's just a little smelly." Someone immediately shouted from the houses on both sides. It seemed like they had seen this thing before. However, the smell was really suffocating. It was as if a huge rock had been crushed on one's chest, making it hard to breathe and easy to pass out. The people at the front were pushed into the range of the skunk bombs from behind. They held their chests, vomited, and shed tears as they rushed forward. When they finally ran out of the range and could take a breath of fresh air, they were greeted by another skunk bomb. "Be careful, sir." The guard waved his saber to deflect the hidden weapons that fell from the houses on both sides. "Send 6 people up and kill the pursuers on the roof. Send 1 more person to speed up. Blarg, send some more people to block the enemy. Blarg." As Rinpochian spoke, a pungent wind blew into his nose. Although there were enemies blocking the way, logically speaking, their current speed of advancement was not considered slow. After all, the powerful aboriginals had a greater advantage at night. If one were to look down from the sky, the 3 armies would look like 3 gluttonous snakes that were constantly devouring Dowdu in front of them. However, the smell behind him was even faster. This thing is really a double-edged sword. It hurts both the user and the enemy. It's better to prepare more stun grenades and flash grenades next time. Rinpochian couldn't help but think. But even so, the skunk bomb could be very useful sometimes, especially at this time. So he had no choice but to use it. For example, right now, the pursuers behind them were crying and vomiting as they chased after them. They probably only had half of their forces left. Rinpoche tore off a piece of cloth and wrapped it around his face. Even though it wasn't very useful, it was better than nothing. Cut this place off. Let the pillars fall toward the houses on both sides. Just as Rinpoche covered his face, his eyes suddenly lit up. He and the others had just passed by something that looked like a memorial archway. There were 2 thick wooden pillars on both sides, and a sign was attached to each of them. Pingxing Street was what was written on the sign. One of the guards leaped high and cut the sign in half. The other 2 guards cut down the pillars and pushed them up, causing them to fall toward the houses on both sides. With a loud bang, the 2 pillars formed an X in the middle of the street. Although the enemy could drill through, they had no choice but to slow down here. Stop and intercept them here. Rinpoche stopped in his tracks while the rest of the guards stood behind the fallen pillars. In any case, as long as they could obstruct the enemy for a while, they could prevent the soldiers in front from being attacked from both sides. Not long after everyone stopped, the enemy caught up with them. Their eyes were bloodshot and tears were streaming down their cheeks. Their bodies were also emitting a pungent stench, causing many of the guards to turn green. Kill! Following the shouts of the soldiers, one by one, they drilled through the gaps around the X. There were only 6 or 7 of them at a time. The well-prepared guards raised their swords, and blood immediately sprayed out. Then, Rinpoche threw another skunk bomb toward the center of the street, which was blocked by the soldiers. This skunk bomb was really too wicked. The enemy had already tightly packed the street, which was more than 7 meters wide. The front was blocked, the back was also blocked by their own people, and there were buildings on both sides. The suffocating stench filled this section of the street, and the enemy could only cry and vomit as they squeezed forward. When they finally squeezed to the front with great difficulty, they had already lost half of their strength. What greeted them were the steel swords of more than a dozen earth-wheel level guards. Many of them hacked at the 2 pillars in front of them, but ordinary people could only leave scratches on them with bone swords. Get lost, I'll do it. A burly man squeezed out of the crowd and lifted a pillar. The others followed suit and tried to move the 2 pillars away. However, the pillars were stuck in the walls on both sides. When they tried their best to lift the pillars, they were greeted by several sword rays. Rinpoche looked up and saw figures moving quickly on the roofs of the houses on both sides. Fortunately, those experts didn't take the usual route and were all on the roofs. That was why the street below was able to block the enemy for so long. Following a series of dull footsteps, Rinpoche looked back and saw an army of a few hundred people rushing over. Sir Rin, they cupped their fists and greeted. I'll leave it to you. Stop them. Rinpoche called for his guards to quickly withdraw, and the reinforcements immediately sent some people to block the enemy. Rinpoche jumped down from his mount, jumped onto a roof, and looked at both sides of the street. Sure enough, they were also blocked from behind. In the distance, he could see densely packed torches rushing in this direction. If the entire city was a big piece of pie, then the Aboriginal army was a steel knife that directly cut into it. However, after the steel knife was pulled out, the pie behind the steel knife closed up again, leaving only a small gap. Seeing Rinpoche appear on the roof, a few people who looked like captains immediately jumped onto the roof. Bang! 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 Rinpoche shot down the people who jumped onto the roof and threw 2 skunk bombs down. Seeing that many people were pointing their bows at him, he quickly jumped down. Let's go! Rinpoche jumped back onto his mount and called out to the guards. By the time Rinpoche and the guards reached the front, Qingping had already taken over the warlord's residence. Rinpoche strode into the residence and saw more than a dozen women lying in the hall. The blood on their bodies formed a small lake below their bodies. Rinpoche frowned and sized them up. He saw that the oldest of these women was about 40 years old, and the youngest was only a teenager. The injuries on their bodies were sword wounds. This wasn't done by the army. This thought immediately popped up in Rinpoche's mind. The Aboriginals mostly used knives and mainly chopped. As a result, the places that they passed through were all severed limbs. Some of the generals also used heavy weapons such as broadswords, hammers, and maces. Since this wasn't done by the army, it must have been done by the Aboriginals themselves. According to the information he received, this was Siakoan's residence. In that case, were these people killed by Siakoan? Looking at the appearance, age, and attire of these women, they were probably Siakoan's wife and daughter. This person was vicious enough to not forget to kill his wife and daughter before escaping to prevent them from falling into the hands of the enemy. Chapter 547. Today, my hands were cheap. I took a look at the book review and comment section. Really, for an author, it was really cheap to look at the book review and comment section. This was because there were always various reasonable or inexplicable comments in the book review and comment section. If you asked any author who wasn't a standalone author, they would definitely receive such an answer. In the book review and comment section, some people said that the book had no main plot. Some people ridiculed, and there were even people who criticized me for saying that this book was a type of Tianwen. I only wanted to say one thing. No main plot? Isn't recovering Tianjin Basin the main plot? If we don't recover the people here, do we rely on the Aboriginals to develop technology? In my setting, this part of the content is part of the main plot. As for the rest, I'm too lazy to explain. You can think whatever you want. In fact, I don't even know what the main plot in your hearts is. I'll tell you my story. How you view this story, whether it's good or bad, is up to the readers. In addition, there were some people who read pirated versions and then came here to criticize the original version. I didn't want to say anything about how much a book costs per month. Even though I couldn't do nothing when the readers who spent money to read the book criticized me, I still had the intention to communicate with them. However, there were also some people who had the mentality of bandits. If there are free things, why spend money? Since they had become bandits, they shouldn't jump out with a clear conscience. If they felt that the book wasn't good and wasn't worth spending money on, they could choose not to read it. No one would force them to read it. Chapter 548. Oh, they went back halfway after coming out? Rinpochian looked at the contents of the paper in front of him and muttered, "How did you get the news?" On this piece of paper was the whereabouts of one of the leaders of the rebel army, Tai Zai, the son of the former chief of the North Alliance. They set off on the night the Aboriginals attacked Shuiyang City and returned halfway the next day. It seemed that they had received the news of Shuiyang City being breached. He was sent to persuade the rebel army to surrender. In the beginning, the situation was still fine. Later on, as the news of the surrender spread, the rebel army began a large-scale manhunt. Some of them were killed, while some escaped and went into hiding. This person hid in time. I just got in touch with him, Zwolung said in a deep voice. "Where is he?" Rinpochian asked. "He didn't come back. This person is now a lieutenant under Tai Zai." When the army crossed the river, many people who were in hiding came to Shuiyang City. He was the one who brought the news back through others. Those people who didn't surrender but didn't recognize him, did he use some means to hide his identity? Rinpochian was puzzled at first, but he soon understood. Yes, he has been using a fake face for the past few decades. This time, he used the same face to persuade people to surrender. When he sensed that something was wrong, he immediately changed his identity. "I just found out about this," Swa Chung said, sounding a little incredulous. This person wasn't a nobody, but he had been wearing a fake face for decades without anyone noticing. If it weren't for this incident, perhaps no one would have noticed. This was really amazing. He's a talent. What's his name? Rinpochian was a little happy. Such a person could be very useful. Rinpochian immediately thought of letting this person train spies in the future. "Sir, his name is Hu Chung. He's at the upper level of the man-wheel level," Zwolung replied. "Is there any way to contact him?" Rinpochian asked. Although he wasn't very strong, his strength wasn't the most important thing about him. He left a way to contact him. "As long as you put the news somewhere on time, he will naturally get someone to retrieve it," Zwolung said. "Well, Let him bring back important news from Tai Zai and don't expose his identity because of some insignificant news. If you discover that something is amiss, get away in time. If necessary, send someone to support him, Ren Baqian instructed. As for those who came back, I'll meet them in the afternoon. Have you found the location of the rearguard commandery? Sir, we found a suitable residence. The owner has already moved elsewhere. Yes. Ren Baqian nodded and asked, how are the 3 scholars from Great Xia doing? Not bad. You can infer some useful information from some intelligence reports. After understanding the situation, Ren Baqian dismissed Zuolong. In the afternoon, he met with those martial artists who had managed to escape the calamity in the south and absorb them into the protectorate. After all, those who survived in that kind of situation were either good at hiding, good at escaping, or careful and cautious enough. No matter which one it was what he needed. At night, Ren Baqian returned to Earth. He had been busy with various things in Dayo for the past few days and could finally rest after returning to Earth. Unfortunately, in a place like Congo, where black men were everywhere, he didn't even have the guts to entertain himself. Just as he switched on his phone, he saw a series of messages from Yang Senator according to what Yang Sen said. Ren Baqian checked on the internet and found out that a lot of things had happened in the country recently. The biggest thing was that a few big tigers had fallen one after another. And this was what Yang Sun wanted to say. It seemed like this was his explanation for Ren Baqian. Looking at the slightly familiar names and their identities, Ren Baqian finally heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, he didn't use some small fries to fool him. Regardless of whether there were other people or not, at least what he saw was enough. It was also enough to deter others. Presumably, he would be able to live in peace for a period of time in the future. After staying in Congo for another 2 days, Ren Baqian made contact with a relatively big arms dealer. He was said to have a lot of connections. Some things that weren't easy to get could be obtained if one was willing to pay a high price. For example, a tactical nuclear bomb with a yield of 2,000 tons. Back then, the U.S. bombed a 14,000-ton atomic bomb, causing 200,000 casualties. The number of deaths on that day was 80,000. If used well, a tactical nuclear bomb with a yield of 2,000 tons was enough to wipe out an army of tens of thousands. This kind of power could already be considered a precious military artifact. What was more precious was the deterrent power of this weapon. As long as it was used once, everyone would have to kneel if a nuclear warhead was thrown at them. Unfortunately, this was only a rumor. Since both parties weren't familiar with each other, the other party naturally denied it. Ren Baqian left the contact information of the arms dealer and was prepared to find out more about him in the future. If he could get 1 or 2 nuclear bombs from the other party, he would definitely give one to Xia Baichong. After settling this matter, Ren Baqian finally got on the plane for the return trip. The moment he stepped on the plane, many people in the distance heaved a sigh of relief. Many people were afraid that he would hook up with some flirtatious slut outside, which would be troublesome. Ren Baqian got off the plane and rushed straight to the Messier 87 department. He was very interested in the research results that Yang San had sent him. Both parties met and pretended that nothing had happened in the past month. You said that you found meridians? Ren Baqian was the first to ask. This kind of research progress made him extremely concerned. Yes, take a seat first. Yang San asked, do you want some tea? After making 2 cups of tea, Yang San said, we have indeed found it. It's called the mesenchyme. In fact, it was first discovered overseas. It's an extremely small network of channels filled with liquid that penetrates the connective tissue. It exists under the human skin and is responsible for the circulation of water in the human body. It's like the highway of liquid flow in the human body. The mesenchyme is known as a kind of organ. Although it was first discovered overseas, there hasn't been much research on it due to the lack of time. Recently, our researchers have made a new discovery through the corpses provided by you and some man-wheel experts who have reached the man-wheel level. After a practitioner reaches the man-wheel level, the essence and blood in the body will be transformed into qi. This qi is constantly flowing in the body, and the channel through which it flows is the mesenchyme. This is also known as the meridians. After Yang Sun finished speaking, Rin Baqian immediately gave him a thumbs up and said, "Great discovery. After this discovery, we have already optimized the previous martial arts techniques. Now, it is more suitable for warriors in the environment of Earth. I want a copy." Rin Baqian laughed. The research had finally yielded results, and it was indeed a happy thing. Now, he finally saw some returns. He could rest assured that he could hand over this kind of optimized martial arts technique to his parents and Ren Wanyan. We need more martial arts techniques. The more comprehensive the database is, the more we can research, Yang Sun said. Yes, I just happen to have a batch of martial arts techniques. It's better than what you have obtained previously, Rin Baqian said. You really won't release the eagle until you see the rabbit. Yang Sun couldn't help but say, "Don't say that. You have to let me see some returns. After all, compared to what I have given you, what you have given me is already very little. Furthermore, this batch of things was indeed obtained recently. You also know that I have been at war recently and have just raided a large number of sections." Rin Baqian laughed heartily. "Oh." Yang Sun immediately revealed a look of extreme interest. "I won't say much. Anyway, I do have a batch of secret manuals. I will pick out a portion and bring it to you." Rin Baqian waved his hand. He didn't want to talk too much about Dayo. "We also need the corpses of experts. The samples are still too few," Yang Sun immediately said. Chapter 549. "Sir, you are back." The six of them were pleasantly surprised to see Rin Baqian. "Where is Her Majesty?" "It's Big Boss and Second Boss. Her Majesty has conquered Shuiyang City and is busy suppressing the rebellion," Rin Baqian corrected them. "It's a pity that we can't follow Her Majesty into battle." They felt that it was a pity that drinking here wasn't as fun as chopping people's heads off. "Your teacher has gone back for the new year. You guys can stay here for the time being. Two of you, come with me," Rin Baqian instructed as he went to change his clothes. He didn't go back for the new year last year, and it was time for him to go back this year. The main thing was to bring back the improved martial arts manual that he had just obtained. Rin Baqian first called Ren Wanyan to confirm that he would be at home for the next 2 days before leaving with the 2 winged cavalry warriors. Although it wasn't really necessary, these winged cavalry warriors still wanted to see the outside world. After all, they weren't brought here just to be gatekeepers. It had to be said that bringing 2 winged cavalry warriors out would reduce the number of people turning their heads and the deterrent effect of going out with the Empress. While they were on the plane, the 2 winged cavalry warriors kept looking out of the window. Their eyes were wide open, and they kept muttering, "Oh, oh, ah, oh." Looking at the stewardess' expression as if she had been molested, Ren Baqian wanted to throw these 2 shameful fellows out of the plane. After spending some time returning to the neighborhood, Ren Baqian sighed for a long time downstairs. When he went upstairs and knocked on the door, he was surprised to find a family that he didn't know at all. The other party was also a loss when they saw Ren Baqian and the 2 winged cavalry warriors who had the word thugs written on their faces. Rin Baqian only found out after a call that his family had moved and rented out their old house without him knowing. "Dad, tell me the truth. Am I your biological son?" Rin Baqian asked in astonishment. "You finally asked this question?" Rin Baqian's father lamented on the other end of the phone. "The little baby that I got for topping up my phone has grown up in the blink of an eye. Dad, does my mom know that you are so mischievous?" Rin Baqian grinned. After asking for the address, Rin Baqian finally found his house after more than half an hour. "You still know to come back. Where's your girlfriend? Is he here yet?" When Mama Rin opened the door and saw him, 2 of her fingers stuck to his ear. She even stretched out her head to look for the lady in red that she had seen previously. In the end, she saw 2 bears and was immediately shocked. "Huh, who are they?" "Well, I'm considered a bodyguard," Rin Baqian replied casually and turned around to greet them. "Come in." Mama Rin brought him into the room and asked softly, "Where did you find these 2 people? Can't you find 2 decent ones? These 2 don't look like decent people." "Don't worry." Although he looked a little fierce, he wasn't a bad person. They used to be soldiers. Oh, only then did Mama Ren feel relieved. Rinpoche fooled his mother and went out to greet his father and younger brother. He got the two uneasy-winged cavalry warriors to sit down at the side before he sized up the house. The house was on the 5th floor of a newly built district. It was a large flat with 4 bedrooms, 2 living rooms, and 2 bathrooms. It was about 200 square meters. The decorations were simple, mainly in dark colors, looking a little old-fashioned. However, the house that his parents lived in was whatever they wanted. "Mom, Dad, Wanyan, I have something to tell you," Rinpoche said after looking around the house. "Why? Are you getting married?" Papa Rin asked in surprise. "I'm the last to know." Rinpoche was speechless. "Let's get down to business. When are you getting married?" Mama Rin couldn't help but ask. "In another 2 or 3 years," Rinpoche said helplessly. "In another 2 or 3 years, your classmate's son will be in primary school. We won't be able to help you take care of the child," Mama Rin said sourly. Rinpoche paused for a moment. He really did have a classmate who got married after graduating from junior high school. His child should be around 7 or 8 years old now. Even if his son reached the Earth Wheel level in 1 more year in Dayo, married the Empress, and had a child, it would still take at least 2 years. That would be 6 years on Earth. Let's get down to business. Rinpoche threw these thoughts to the side. Papa Run and Mama Run could finally sit on the sofa and listen to him. Now, the nation has sorted out the ancient books and researched the cultivation method. Although it can't make you immortal, it can strengthen your body and prolong your life. I have practiced Tai Chi, and your mom could do square dance. Papa Rin looked like he thought Rinpoche was going to say something, but it turned out to be this. "It's not the same." Rinpoche shook his head. He raised his hand and smashed the coffee table in front of him, smashing it into pieces. Papa Run, Mama Run, and Rin Wanyan were shocked. This coffee table was made of solid wood that was 6 centimeters thick. Even if it was smashed with a hammer, it would have to be a large one. Rinpoche actually smashed it with his bare hands. That's basically it. Strengthen your body and prolong your life. At a certain stage of cultivation, it's entirely possible to live to 150 or even 200 years old, Rinpoche said. "You're not bluffing?" The 3 of them still felt that it was a little unbelievable. They knew what Rinpoche was like originally. However, in recent years, he had become a little unrecognizable. Being rich was one thing, and it was still within an acceptable range. However, the scene in front of them was a little scary. This slap on the coffee table. If it were to be slapped on a person, it was scary just thinking about it. If this kind of martial arts is spread, it will have a great impact on society, so it won't be made public for the time being. However, some people have already started to practice it, especially in the military and some special departments. "So what you mean is, I brought it back for you to practice. Don't you have any confidentiality rules? If others find out, you don't have to worry about this. However, you can only practice it yourself and can't pass it on to others. Don't leak it, including my 7 aunts and 8 aunts. If it gets out, I will be in some trouble," Rinpoche said faintly. The nation wasn't ready and wouldn't make it public for a while. Even if Yang's son didn't inform him, he wouldn't do this. The more people who knew about it, the higher the possibility of it getting out. It wouldn't be good if it caused trouble. After a while, the 3 of them finally digested what Rinpoche said. He then took out a USB and plugged it into the TV for them to watch. At the same time, he also explained some of the things that needed attention. In addition, he would get people to send some food regularly in the future. After all, martial arts didn't only require practice, but also nourishment. If there wasn't a suitable method to nourish the body, it would easily cause irreparable damage to the body. Fortunately, this was relatively simple for him. He just needed to bring back some meat and medicinal herbs from Dayo regularly. After staying at home for 2 days, Rinpoche bought 2 plane tickets for the 2 winged cavalry warriors and threw them a sum of money so that they could find a way to go back themselves. Whether they took a plane or chartered a car, Rinpoche didn't care. He wasn't a nanny, and these winged cavalry warriors had to learn to do things independently in this world. As for himself, He collected 1,500 grenades and 300 flash bombs from somewhere in the city before returning to Dayo. Chapter 550. After the Aboriginals occupied Shuyang City, the people in the city experienced despair at the beginning. After Rinpochian got people to shout throughout the city, they gradually calmed down after a few days. Although they were still afraid and at a loss for the future, it seemed that these barbarians didn't kill anyone on sight as they had previously thought. Although there were still people who were captured and beheaded from time to time, these were the people who had hidden rebel soldiers in their homes. The ordinary people weren't affected much. This made many people heave a sigh of relief. They prayed every day that such days would continue and that these barbarians wouldn't become beastly and raise their butcher knives against the commoners. If it wasn't for the fact that they couldn't leave the city, many people would have wanted to leave the city to hide. After 3 to 5 months, they would be able to see clearly. Sir, there are a total of 73 households harboring rebel soldiers, and 6 of them are wealthy families. Zhuolong handed a list to Rinpochian. Rinpochian took it, scanned it, raised his head, and asked, "Why do you think this is so?" "Sir, I don't understand." Zhuolong lowered his head. "Why do you think these people risk their lives to shelter the rebel soldiers? Unless they are close relatives, it would be very difficult for them to do so, right? But if they were close relatives, why did these hidden rebel soldiers stay there even though they knew that doing so would implicate those who protected them? Some of them would rather risk their lives to protect others, but the others would rather help their own people risk their lives than give up their lives. From this point, it seems that both parties have the same goal. However, I'm very curious about what these 2 types of people are thinking," Rinpochian said faintly. Zhuolong opened his mouth. At first, he thought that this was an easy question to answer. Because they were close relatives, they were sheltered. But as Rinpochian spoke, he began to be puzzled. Right? Why would those people risk their lives and not give up their lives to come out? "Sir, I also don't understand," Zhuolong said. "Is that so? One side is thinking for the people of the other side, while the other side is only thinking for themselves." Rinpochian laughed. "Let's go and take a look." Rinpochian stood up. A moment later, Rinpochian left the residence with 20 bodyguards. There were a few baihu and dozens of tiki leading the way in front. Among them, there was even a strong man who was familiar with this place. "Zhuolong!" Rinpochian shouted. Zhuolong immediately steered his mount to the back of Rinpochian. "Have you arranged everything? Arrest them one by one. Don't let some of them run away after hearing the news," Rinpochian said. "Sir, everything has been arranged. They won't be able to escape," Zhuolong immediately guaranteed. "Lead the way." The horses galloped on the stone road, and the crisp sound of hooves could be heard. A few commoners who had no choice but to come out of their houses saw them from afar, and they shivered and hid at the side. Rinpochian sat on his mount and looked to both sides. Occasionally, he could see figures appearing by the window or the door, looking at them with fear. The feeling of being feared could not be said to be good or bad. There wasn't much sense of accomplishment, but it wasn't too disgusting either. After walking for an hour in the city, they arrived at a civilian area and stopped in front of an alley. The baihu led the tiki and rushed into the alley. Finally, they smashed open the doors of each house. The noise and 2 screams could be heard from afar. After a while, 4 people were escorted in front of Rinpochian. A few of them stayed behind to guard the place, while the others went straight into the distance to continue the arrest. 2 of them looked to be in their 40s. They were a man and a woman in tattered clothes, and they gave off the vibe of old age. Generally, people like them looked much older than they actually were. Life had already dragged them down. The other 2 were 16 or 17 years old youths who were full of youthful vigor. At this moment, the 4 of them had a knife on their necks. They looked up at Rinpochian with fear. Many people in the surrounding houses were spying on them in the dark. They were like rats in the sewers and didn't dare to show their heads. "Sir, spare us, sir." Rinpochian ignored the cries of the people below him, turned around, and asked Zhuolong, "Which one is the rebel?" The two younger ones, Zwolung replied after turning around and asking a few questions. A few days ago, I sent someone to shout. Did you all hear it? Why are you harboring the rebel? Rinpoche looked down at them from his mount and asked, Sir, spare us. Xiaoxi is immature and has never done anything bad. The middle-aged man and woman immediately begged for mercy. I said, Why are you harboring the rebel? Rinpoche repeated, That's our child. The two of them immediately fell to the ground and cried. Is Xiaoxi your child? What about the other one? Rinpoche asked softly. It was natural for parents to protect their children, but unfortunately, this child didn't live up to expectations. The two of them were so overwhelmed with fear that they couldn't make a sound. After being reminded by the knife on their necks, they cried and said, He was the one who brought him back. Who's Xiaoxi? Rinpoche looked down at the two young men. Did you hear what I sent someone to shout? Rinpoche asked. The young man was terrified. His body trembled, and he couldn't say a word. Tell him that he has to answer what I said. Rinpoche said. One of the tiki immediately kicked Xiaoxi, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. Did you hear that? Yes. Yes. Why aren't you coming out? When you joined the rebel army, you were already prepared to die. Why would you rather drag your family of 3 to death than come out? Speak. Following Rinpoche's shout, the young man's head was hit by the hilt of the knife again, and his head was bleeding. I'm scared. Is this the rebel army? Is this the so-called rebel army? Rinpoche chuckled, and his voice was full of mockery. When you were bewitched by others, you became hot-blooded and wanted to shed your blood for the people of the world. However, when things came to a head, you would rather drag your entire family to death and even bring along a good comrade. It seems like you're quite loyal, but the price is the lives of your parents. If you want to kill me, then kill me. The other young man roared angrily. Well, you're very strong-willed. If you were strong-willed, you would have died in battle long ago. At the very least, you should have committed suicide in their house. They would then drag your body out and say that a rebel army broke into their house and killed you. This way, you might have been able to escape with your life. However, you didn't do that. Instead, you retreated at the critical moment and enjoyed the protection that others gave you at the cost of their lives. Rinpoche's face was full of sarcasm. You evil ghost. Evil ghost. The young man couldn't bear the meaning behind Rinpoche's words and frantically tried to pounce on Rinpoche. However, he was stepped on by someone. Rinpoche raised his head and asked, Did you see what kind of people these people are? I saw them, sir. Selfish, cowardly, and ignorant. Such people are the rebels. Rinpoche chuckled. Like a demon, his voice was full of malice and mockery and spread to the ears of the surrounding people who were covering their mouths and peeping carefully. Kill them, Rinpoche said coldly after laughing. A few weapons were immediately inserted into the bodies of these people. Let's go and take a look at the next one, Rinpoche said. The group of people left on their mounts. After a long time, some people came out of their houses to look at the corpses lying in a pool of blood. All of them looked dejected. After spending half a day, Rinpoche had seen the same show 7 or 8 times. There were various reasons, but the final result was the same. Rinpoche finally lost interest and went back with the guards, leaving the people from the rearguard commandery to continue the arrest. On the way, the guard scratched his head and said, Sir, I still don't understand why you did this. You actually know how to use your brain to think about why? Rinpoche turned his head and looked at the guard in surprise. I always feel that people can't understand the way you do things, and it's the same this time. I thought about it and really didn't expect it, the guard said. Very good. Knowing how to use your brain is the first step for you to evolve from a monkey to a human. Rinpoche praised. Monkey? The guard scratched his head and didn't know what relationship he had with monkeys. Of course, Rinpoche then slowly said, On the one hand, I'm really curious. On the other hand, I also wanted to make an example out of these people. At the same time, I wanted to expose their hearts to others. This way, some people will think twice before doing something stupid again and see if it's worth it. Chapter 551. Sirs, please take care of Shuiyang City. Rinpoche cupped his fists at Zhuocheng and Qingyun's sword. The two of us can't stop the army, the two of them said. No problem. Her Majesty will leave 1,000 soldiers here to guard. You just have to be careful not to let the local experts take advantage of the loopholes, Rinpoche said. There were three most important cities in the Three Rivers Valley. One was Shuiyang City, the other was Yoshin City, where Taizai was, and the last was Chun City, where Raoyu was. Shuiyang City faced the Wang Estuary, Yoshin City faced the Ghost Ridge in the northwest, and Chun City was in the south. The three cities supported each other. In particular, Shuiyang City was the most important city in between the two cities. Originally, the rebel army was going to delay the Aboriginal army in Shuiyang City. When the other two cities arrived, the Aboriginals would be attacked from three sides. However, they didn't expect that Shuiyang City would be breached in just one night. Siekuan was defeated and escaped with tens of thousands of soldiers. At this time, the Empress was preparing to attack Yoshin City in the northwest because it was the only way to threaten the Aboriginals' food supply. However, she was worried that Raoyu would take advantage of this opportunity to attack, so she left 1,000 soldiers in Shuiyang City. Rinpoche also asked Zhuocheng and Qingyun's sword to guard the city. It was impossible for them to attack the city, but it was still possible for them to guard the city, and they didn't refuse. 1,000 Aboriginal soldiers were enough to be used as 10,000 soldiers. Moreover, they were guarding the city. Even if they were attacked, they could hold out for 2 days. Instead, they had to be careful of the enemy expert surprise attacks. There wasn't much difference between a spirit wheel expert killing a wheel expert and an ordinary person. Killing 1,000 was definitely much easier than killing 10,000. I'll leave that sleeping fellow to you. If the enemy experts are difficult to deal with, call her. Rinpoche took out a bag of white rabbit creamy candy and threw it to Zhuocheng. Just give this to her when the time comes. Rinpoche now trusted Zhuocheng more than Qingyun's sword. Zhuocheng wasn't as idealistic as Qingyun's sword. The Lingshan sect was his root. Now, other than Zhuocheng and sect master Su Xing, there were only a few people left in the Soul Mountain sect. The rest had all entered the rearguard commandery. On the other hand, even though Qingyun's sword was the first to surrender, he had too many thoughts and misgivings. As a result, he was always restrained. Even when Rinpoche forced him to do a few things, he was still unable to act freely. This made Rinpoche somewhat dissatisfied. After chatting with him for a while, Rinpoche let them leave. The two of them walked out of the house side by side. Zhuocheng said lightly, "What are you hesitating for?" Being overcautious and indecisive won't accomplish anything. After he finished speaking, he did not look at Qingyun's sword's reaction and walked along the stone path, disappearing into the crowd in just a few steps. Qingyun's sword stood there in a daze for a long time before heading in another direction. Not long after the two of them left, Rinpoche followed the Empress's carriage out of the west gate under the escort of the army and headed northwest. "How long do you think it will take for Raoyu to come?" The Empress asked faintly as she reclined on the animal skin and ate some fruits. "When we arrive at Yoshin City, the general guarding the city is Hong Cheng. As the saying goes, like father, like son, I believe he will be able to defend the city. Moreover, your Majesty has left 200 of your sharpest knives for him, which should be enough to deal with most situations." Rinpoche laughed. Furthermore, he had left so many skunk bombs. As he spoke, his gaze swept across the Empress's exquisite body, which was wrapped in a red muslin. The Empress said in an eerie voice, "If you continue to look, I will gouge your eyeballs out." She even licked her lips as she spoke, which made her look even more seductive. It was the complete opposite of her tone, which made people feel as if they had been doused with a bucket of water from a well. "Your Majesty's appearance has already been engraved in my heart. Unless I gouge my heart out," Rinpoche said as he covered his chest. Qin Yuan and Hong Wan stuck out their tongues. Sir Ren was still the most daring. The Empress glared at him fiercely. She liked and hated shameless Rinpoche at the same time. "You dog," the Empress said with a soft voice and a soft gaze. Even though she said such vulgar words, her soft voice made people's hearts burn. "Your Majesty, where did you learn this?" If the officials in the imperial court heard this, they would definitely skin me alive. Rinpoche looked at the Empress's suddenly gentle face and asked with a smile. His fingers danced on the ground and jumped onto the back of the Empress's hand. Then, the guards at the side saw a person fly out of the imperial carriage. "Damn it!" Rinpoche sat back on the fork-horned cow and muttered to himself. "You were the one who seduced me, yet you kicked me out. Your tricks are getting more and more sophisticated." After walking for half a day, everyone stopped to rest at noon. Lunch was 4 fist-sized coarse grain dumplings and a little meat soup. Not long after everyone started eating, the periphery began to become chaotic. "What's the matter?" the Empress asked with a frown. "Sir Ren, what happened?" Hong Wan asked Rinpoche. "I will go and take a look." Rinpoche was about to go forward with a barbecued meat bun in his mouth when a Baihu ran to his side and said, "Sir, a large number of poisonous insects have appeared outside. What happened?" "It should be the insect soldiers of the 6 doors. Since they're insect soldiers, there must be someone controlling them. Find them and kill them," Rinpoche said coldly. He had heard a little about the 6 doors, so he immediately calmed down. He walked forward as he spoke and found a tall figure standing outside the crowd, Qing Ping. He waved his long saber, and the ground in front of him seemed to have been plowed. All the soil was turned up, and masses of yellow and green liquid burst out of the soil. Rinpoche looked ahead with rapt attention and finally saw clearly. The ground in front of him was covered with snakes and insects of all sizes wriggling on the ground. There were spiders, snakes, centipedes, and unknown insects. It was colorful and densely packed, and it was disgusting. In particular, the rustling sound they made when they crawled made people's scalps go numb. "Captain Qing, these insects should be controlled by someone. Listen and see if there are any strange sounds," Rinpoche said from behind Qing Ping. After speaking, Rinpoche listened attentively, but there were no strange sounds at all. There was only the rustling sound of crawling everywhere. Qing Ping slashed again, listened attentively, and then frowned. Obviously, he didn't hear anything either. Anyone who can find out who is controlling these poisonous insects will be rewarded handsomely. Rinpoche shouted to the people behind him. "Sir, they might not be directly controlled by someone." A Baihu stepped forward and said, "I found this." As he spoke, he took out a plant with fragmented yellow flowers in his hand. "What's this?" Rinpoche asked. "This is a ginger flower. There's nothing special about it, but if it's sprinkled with a special powder, it can emit a smell that many poisonous insects like. The ginger flower that we found in our resting spot had been sprinkled with this powder. In other words, these snakes and insects weren't controlled by someone to attack us, but we blocked their way." "How do you know all this?" Rinpoche asked. "When I was in the south back then, I coincidentally learned about some miscellaneous methods," the Baihu said. "How did they know that we would rest here? Who found this place?" Rinpoche asked with cold eyes. "Sir, they might not have known where we would rest. This type of ginger flower is very common. If I were to do it, I would just need to sprinkle the powder on the ginger flowers in every spacious place that is suitable for setting up camp and resting. When the army rested, they would release the insects from a distance, and they would naturally come to us. If one didn't know, it would be easy to think that these snakes and insects were being controlled to come to us." "Well done." Rinpoche patted his shoulder and praised him. "In other words, as long as we retreat, everything will be fine, right?" "Yes." "Everyone, retreat to the road. Carefully check if there are any small red flowers on the ground." Shiwanya, who had just arrived, shouted after hearing this. After a while, everyone returned to the road and found that there were many such small flowers at the edge of the road. There were even some that had been thrown to the ground in the middle of the road. These things weren't easy to attract attention. If it weren't for that Baihu, they would have suffered quite a bit. After burying the ginger flowers that had been thrown on the road, the snakes and insects stopped advancing when they reached the roadside. Instead, they surrounded the ginger flowers and crawled up and down. Finally, they gathered into a group of insects, which made people's scalps go numb. "What's your name?" Rinpoche called the Baihu over and asked. "Sir, I'm Yukaiyong. As I said just now, if the person controlling the snakes and insects is caught, you will be rewarded handsomely. Even though you didn't catch the person controlling the snakes and insects, you have made a great contribution. Take note that Yukaiyong will be promoted by 2 ranks and will be promoted to a Baihu." "Thank you, sir," Yukaiyong said happily. "Well done." Rinpoche was very satisfied. "Well done." A burly voice came from the side. Rinpoche turned his head and saw Shiwanya nodding at him. "Thank you for your praise, sir and Protector General," Yukaiyong said. "You may leave. I'll get someone to send the token to you later. As for the warrant, I'll make it up in the future," Rinpoche said. After Yukaiyong left, Rinpoche turned to Shiwanya and said, "It seems like we really have to be more careful along the way. I heard that in addition to the insect soldiers, the 6 doors also have monkey soldiers and elephant soldiers, which are very difficult to deal with." As soon as Rinpoche finished speaking, he felt the ground begin to shake. The source of the shaking was in front of them. This shaking seems like a large number of cavalrymen are attacking in this direction. The rebel army definitely wouldn't dare to face them head-on. Since they aren't cavalrymen, it seems like they're elephant soldiers. Rinpoche, who had just seen the insect soldiers, suddenly had this thought. Since the insect soldiers had appeared, it was reasonable for the elephant soldiers to appear as well. If he and the others didn't notice the problem with the first wave of attacks with the insects, he was afraid that some people would be injured. However, they would eventually realize that the attacks on the road were relatively less and retreat here. After that, the elephant soldiers would charge over. If everyone blocked the path of the elephant soldiers, they would definitely suffer heavy losses. If they entered the bushes on both sides, they would become food for the insects. The other party's plan was really good. Rinpoche looked forward as he thought about it. He then saw the behemoths, which were up to 6 meters tall and had tusks that were more than 3 meters long, charging in this direction. Chapter 552. This elephant is really big. Rinpoche muttered to himself as he looked at the giant elephants that were rushing over from a distance. They were more than 6 meters tall and looked like a 2-story building when they stood there. 2 of these elephants were pushing over as if a building was pushing over, not to mention their 3-meter-long tusks, which were full of deterrents. Moreover, this elephant's body was covered in wrought tan armor. Almost everything above the knee was wrapped in wrought tan armor. Even the elephant's trunk was covered with rings of wrought tan. On the back of each elephant sat a person wearing a brightly colored feather cloak. They were both men and women. Rinpoche looked from afar and saw that these 2 elephants weren't the only ones. It was just that these 2 elephants were in front like a wall that was pushing over, making it easy for people to overlook the fact that there were 2 similar elephants behind them. Rinpoche took out 2 flash bombs from his bag, weighed them in his hand, estimated the distance, pulled out the rings, and threw them forward. Although it was daytime, the flash bombs were still quite powerful and could cause quite a lot of noise. The wrought tan armor on the elephant soldiers could block swords, but it couldn't stop the flash bombs from blinding and deafening the elephants. Even if a human was hit by a flash bomb, they would inevitably panic, let alone an animal. It was enough as long as the elephant soldiers couldn't distinguish the direction and run around. "Lower your head and close your eyes," Rinpoche shouted as he threw the flash bombs. "Be careful, sir." Rinpoche heard the shout behind him just as he lowered his head. He didn't have time to think and took advantage of the situation to fall back. An arrow flew over him with a strong gust of wind. He saw a man standing on the elephant with a bow and arrow in his hand, still maintaining his shooting posture. In the next second, his eyes lit up and then turned black. The loud noise made him dizzy and lose his 5 senses. He was shocked and didn't know what was going on. Along with him, the 2 giant elephants and the controllers on their backs were blinded by the 2 flash bombs that were thrown one after another. The giant elephants were shocked, let out a long howl, and immediately braked before running to both sides in panic. Then, the two giant elephants at the back were revealed. On top of them was a monkey with long reddish-brown hair and a few spirit wheel experts sitting cross-legged. Monkey first grimaced in pain and scratched his ears and cheeks. Then, he let out a strange cry and leaped high into the air with the other martial artists, pouncing towards the crowd. "You've got guts, daring to come and intercept us. You made me think highly of you. But since you're here, just stay here. You're going to die sooner or later anyway. The scenery here is picturesque. It's a good place to bury you." Shi Wanya laughed heartily and blocked Monkey with his long saber, while Qing Ping and Zhong Shan blocked the other spirit wheel experts. As the monkey and the spirit wheel experts fought, they lured the three of them to a distant place. Shi Wanya and the others also fell into their trap and followed them. "Be careful of the surrounding forest, and see if there are any monkeys," Ren Baqian shouted as he grabbed 2 flash grenades in his hands. The insect soldiers and elephant soldiers of the 6 doors had appeared, so would the monkey soldiers be far away? At this moment, Ren Baqian had completely figured out the other party's plan. First, they attacked with poisonous insects, forcing everyone onto the main road. They couldn't escape into the bushes and woods on both sides. Then a few giant elephants pushed over like a wall. At the same time, they used experts to restrain Shi Wanya and the others. Even if the elephant soldiers caused some casualties and confusion in the army, they couldn't cause too many casualties. After all, there were too few of them. The road was too narrow, and only 2 elephants could pass in front. If they died, they would block the path of the elephants behind. Therefore, only 4 elephants were used to create confusion and attract attention. At this time, a real weapon was needed to cause casualties to the army and achieve their goal. There are a lot of monkeys in the trees on both sides. Be careful. When Ren Baqian heard the sound of something piercing through the air, goosebumps appeared all over his body. He hurriedly flipped off the fork-horned cow and landed on the ground. After a few spluttering sounds, the fork-horned cow let out a blood-curdling shriek and fell to the ground. Ren Baqian looked around and saw bone spears shooting out from the forest. Looking into the forest, he saw a few monkeys with short brown fur, about half the height of a human, appearing on the branches. Each of them had a few bone spears tied to their backs, and they were throwing them down as they jumped on the trees. Ren Baqian didn't know what species these monkeys were, but they were extremely strong. The bone spears they threw could directly penetrate the fork-horned cow from dozens of meters away, and even 1/3 of the spears were embedded in the soil. As expected, Ren Baqian understood and threw 2 flash bombs in front of the elephants. He then pulled over the backpack that was hanging on the fork-horned cow, took out a handful of flash bombs, and threw them to the guards at the side. Throw them into the forest. More than 20 flash bombs were thrown out, blinding all the monkeys in the forest. One by one, they lost their balance and fell from the trees while squeaking. The rest of the monkeys were also shocked and quickly ran away while squeaking. "Captain Gong, don't let the winged cavalry enter the forest. Use bone spears," Ren Baqian shouted. The bone spears that the monkeys threw were shot back at their original owners, piercing the blinded monkeys to the ground. Ren Baqian quickly rushed to the front of the Empress's carriage and saw that there were many broken bone spears that were made by the guards. Ren Baqian raised his voice and asked, "Your Majesty, are you alarmed?" Hong Wan pulled the curtain aside and saw the Empress lying in a reclining position with a wine cup in front of her eyes. The sunlight shone on the cup, forming a lifelike phoenix on the wall. The Empress looked down at Ren Baqian and said, "How could anything happen to me in such a situation? Go and do what you need to do." There was some appreciation and joy in her eyes. Ren Baqian was no longer the weak chicken that needed protection and couldn't even trust a chicken. He had begun to be able to take charge. "Yes," Ren Baqian replied. He naturally knew that nothing would happen to the Empress, but he still had to show the proper attitude. Ren Baqian then asked his men to do a head count and found that there were very few casualties. Although these monkey soldiers were pretty strong, they were only a lot stronger than ordinary people and were far from the strength of a manual expert. If the troops were in chaos, they could still take advantage of the situation. However, the poisonous insects were reminded by someone, and the elephants were dealt with a few flash bombs. Rinpoche reminded them that the monkeys were facing an intact army, following which a large number of them were blinded by the flash bombs, and the rest fled. There seemed to be a lot of bone spears, but only a dozen or so unlucky fellows were pierced by the spears. There were also some abrasions, but they didn't suffer too much damage. After understanding the situation, Shiwanya and the others returned one after another. Damn, they ran so fast. Qing Ping cursed. None of them survived? Rinpoche asked casually. He looked at the three of them and found that they didn't have any injuries. That giant snake from last time was also there, and I was almost bitten. Zhongshun said. It was Mongshan. Rinpoche corrected Lin Xiaola, since she wasn't around. Ah, that girl. Upon hearing this, the others also thought of Lin Xiaola and burst out laughing. Protector General Shi, Her Majesty said that it's time to set off. Hong Wan landed beside them in a flash and said in a crisp voice. After walking for more than 2 hours, everyone arrived near a hill. Sir, there are traces of elephant soldiers. There are at least 200 of them. A Baihu came up to report. Rinpoche followed the Baihu to the back of the hill and saw a large area of messy footprints. It seemed that they had stayed here not long ago and were ready to launch a surprise attack when everyone arrived nearby. However, the army in the forest was almost unscathed, so these elephant soldiers had no choice but to retreat. Rinpoche looked at the traces and pondered. This kind of elephant was huge and powerful. If 100 or 200 of them were to charge at the same time, it would be like a collapsing mountain. If the two armies were to confront each other, with these elephant soldiers as the vanguard and the main army following behind, the Aboriginals would suffer heavy losses even if they won. Fortunately, he had a lot of flash bombs on hand, which were enough to restrain these elephants. However, after eliminating the 6 doors in the future, he would have to get his hands on their method of nurturing elephant soldiers. Chapter 553. The Aboriginal army moved much faster than the ordinary army. After all, the weakest among them was a man-wheel expert, and their physical strength and speed were incomparable to that of an ordinary army. They traveled all the way until midnight, and they were already within 30 miles of Yoshin City. Next, they looked for a suitable place to set up camp. Since the other party had elephant soldiers and insect soldiers, they were more cautious this time. They found a place close to a water source and was on high ground. Then, they cut down all the sparse trees in the surrounding area, and everything within 4 to 5 kilometers could be seen at a glance. After setting up camp, everyone took the opportunity to rest. 2 hours later, the sky began to brighten. More than 10 kilometers away from where they set up camp, a small, inconspicuous city stood there. They only set up camp and rest at dawn. We should go out of the city to fight. A valiant-looking young man said as he looked into the distance. This person was the chief of the North Alliance, Tai Zai. He was frowning and holding his breath. Mr. Bu, please send the elephant soldiers to help us. Chief Tai, we don't know what they use to blind people. If they still have this thing, our elephant soldiers won't be of much use. Mr. Bu, who was wearing a colorful feather shawl, spoke up. His expression was similar to Tai Zai's. If it's a night battle or a city defense battle, the elephant soldiers won't be useful. The thing in their hands is even more powerful at night. Siakoan, who was in a slightly sorry state, said. His expression wasn't much different from the two people in front of him. I have already told you the details of the battle in Shuiyang City. Shuiyang City was defeated because we didn't expect the other party to have such a thing, and we lost the city wall almost instantly. In my opinion, the other party only set up camp near dawn and is preparing for another night attack tonight. What the chief said is highly possible. Tai Zai nodded in agreement. Otherwise, the army could usually set up camp and rest in the evening. Now, They had traveled until late at night and only rested when it was close to dawn. With the speed of the Aboriginals, they could cover a distance of more than 10 kilometers in less than 4 hours. After resting for a while, they could attack the city. Presumably, the other party had this in mind. If you fight during the day, let's not talk about whether the other party will accept the challenge. As long as they send troops to kill you when you return to the city at night, so what? You will definitely lose, Mr. Ning said as he waved his fan nearby. Now, he could only wave the fan to blow away the smell on his body, so that he wouldn't feel so smelly. However, that suffocating smell continued to bore into the noses of the others. If it had been someone else, the three of them would have chopped them up and buried them 5 meters underground. What do you think, Mr. Ning? Tai Zai couldn't help but cover his nose, but it didn't improve much. We'll wait for them in the city tonight, and we'll set fire everywhere. Once they are lured into the depths of the city, we will set fire to the city, Mr. Ning said. The three of them were shocked. What about the people in the city? When the time comes, the commoners will scatter and flee in all directions, which will also hinder their movements. The best outcome would naturally be for everyone in the city to die with the barbarians. As far as I know, this city originally had a population of 120,000, but now there are only 100,000. Whether it's worth it for 100,000 people to perish together with 10,000 barbarians, that's up to you. At the very least, in a normal battle, an army of 100,000 would not be a match for those 10,000 barbarians. Mr. Ning's awe-inspiring words made Tai Zai's entire body turn cold. Everyone was silent for a moment, and Xie Kun was the first to speak. I think this plan is feasible. Commander Xie Kun's words made Tai Zai feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave. Chief Tai, I know that you are benevolent and righteous. However, the lives of the commoners are lives. Aren't the soldiers under your command raised by their parents? To kill these barbarians, I don't know how many lives will be sacrificed. What we are doing is also for the lives of the millions of people in Tianjin Basin. Also, the previous chief died in the hands of Qi Zixiao, and the hatred of his father's death is absolutely irreconcilable. Don't you want to take revenge? Xie Kun asked. I want to take revenge and defeat those barbarians, but I can't do that. Tai Zai growled in a low voice. Then do you have any other ideas? Qi Zixiao, Xu Wanya, Zhongshun, Qing Ping, and that unknown girl. There are so many experts. Even if we use all our strength, we won't be able to contend against them, not to mention the winged cavalry. Do you know what the consequences will be if we lose? Everyone in Tianjin Basin will be enslaved by the barbarians, and their life and death will be at their whim. As for you, me, the North Alliance, the Southern Metropolis, and the Green Bellflower, everyone will die without a burial place. Do you want to see the remaining members of the Tai family hanging on the city walls and their corpses being eaten by those birds and beasts? Mr. Ning, is there any other way? Can't we defeat them on the battlefield? Tai Zai raised his head and looked at Mr. Ning. Chief Tai, aren't you clear on whether or not we can defeat them on the battlefield? The Aboriginals aren't good at strategy and production. They don't have any equipment, but with less than 100,000 soldiers, they were able to suppress Great Xia, the Yun Nation, and the Qin Nation. Half a year ago, the 500,000 soldiers of Great Xia were all well-equipped, elite soldiers and fierce generals. How many of them return alive? Even Lu Pinghai was beaten to death by Qi Zixiao. Do you really think the Northern Alliance can compare to the Xia? Unless the world's #1 expert takes action, how are you going to defeat Qi Zixiao, who has countless experts under his command? Mr. Ning said coldly. But this isn't the entire Aboriginals, but 10,000 of them. Tai Zai said with a sinister expression. Yes, so there's still a glimmer of hope. If it were the entire Aboriginals, I wouldn't have come here. You don't have much capital left. Shuiyang City has already been lost, and Governor Xie and the 150,000 soldiers of the North Alliance are all holed up in this small Yoshin city. If you lose again, you won't have another chance. Mr. Ning laughed. The rebels are like the setting sun. displaying everything they have before sinking into the darkness, Rinpoche said as he looked up at the setting sun. Previously, I saw the 6 doors lead the beast soldiers to attack. Although they were repelled, it was only because the difference in strength between the two sides was too great. In addition, the sword of victory was always on our side. I thought that the rebels would attack first, but I didn't expect them to be holed up in Yoshin City. Rinpoche turned his head and smiled at the Empress. Why are you speaking so strangely today? The Empress looked up at him. No, I'm just sighing with emotion. Rinpoche laughed. Where's the poem? I'm still waiting for it. The Empress lazily reclined there, stroked her cheek with her finger, and looked at Rinpoche. The rebels are like the setting sun. Before sinking into the darkness, they display everything they have for the last time. This is a modern poem. It's very popular on Earth. Rinpoche laughed heartily. The Empress's mouth twitched as she turned her head and said, Qing'an, inform Xu Wanya to hurry up and have a meal. We will set off when the sun has completely set. At night, the moon rose above the treetops. The city walls of Yoshin City were brightly lit, and the shadows of people could be seen. Countless people with longbows in their hands widened their eyes as they looked at the army gradually emerging from the darkness. Palm-sized cylinders were suddenly thrown out from the darkness. Be careful! Bang! Beams of white light suddenly exploded in front of everyone. The people on top of the city walls suddenly panicked, and it was unknown how many people were blinded. Don't panic. Take 7 steps back. Back row forward. Following this voice, the people who were blinded retreated 7 steps back in fear and stuck tightly to the wall. The group of people behind them immediately drew their bows and shot downward. However, another batch of flash grenades flew into the air and exploded. Subsequently, hundreds of grenades were thrown to the top of the city wall. Boom! Boom! Sir, run! These things of yours are indeed very useful, Xu Wanya praised. Whether it was flash grenades or grenades, the aboriginals could easily break the enemy's battle formation with these. If we can get our hands on nuclear weapons, this world will be peaceful. Rinpoche laughed. What's that? Xu Wanya asked. They have occupied the top of the city wall. Protector General, it's time to get ready to enter the city. Rinpoche looked at the top of the city wall in the distance and laughed. Everyone set off. Leave none of the rebels alive. Xu Wanya shouted. Chapter 554. At night, Yoshin City was filled with the sounds of fighting. Blood and limbs were splattered everywhere. The sound of steel knives cutting into human bodies made one's teeth ache, and the screams of dying stimulated one's eardrums and brain. Those screams could be heard clearly outside the city. Rinpoche and the Empress sat side by side outside the carriage, enjoying the night breeze and the smell of blood that came from afar. Sing a song for me, the Empress suddenly said. I know how to sing Twinkle Little Star. Rinpoche was excited. Tong Lan, who was in the distance, moved her ears. She had just caught a sentence in the night breeze. Twinkle Little Star. Tong Lan gritted her teeth. All the students in the academy had been beaten up by her, and no one knew what Twinkle Little Star was. The Empress looked up at the night sky and said, You sing, and I'll listen. Twinkle, 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 the sky is full of little stars, shining brightly like many little eyes. Rinpoche hummed softly. The Empress didn't feel that the song was childish. Instead, she felt a different kind of warmth, as if she was listening to a ballad in her mother's arms. It was just that the memory was so long ago that she couldn't even remember it. When she heard this song, she suddenly recalled it from the depths of her memory. After the war is settled, I want to go back to the mountains to take a look, the Empress said. The 60,000 mountains? Rinpoche stopped humming and asked. The Empress nodded slightly. Why do you suddenly have such an idea? It is said that my mother's tomb is in the mountains, and she hasn't seen what I look like now. The Empress was a little emotional, which was rare. I will accompany your Majesty to take a look. However, in order to finish the war, Great Xia has to be scared, Rinpoche said. Aren't you planning something with that person from Great Xia? The Empress asked. I told your majesty that if Great Xia is in chaos, we will be safe. Furthermore, 100 million taels of silver can do a lot of things, Rinpoche said. The Empress nodded and didn't say anything else. In fact, there is no need to finish the war. As long as there is a radio station, it won't affect state affairs. Rinpoche laughed. We can't use it here, the Empress said faintly. Rinpoche opened his mouth. Who would have thought that Tianjin Basin would be so strange? Such a large area was actually a land of silence. At this moment, several figures passed through the city and rushed toward where Rinpoche and the Empress were. Sir Rin, urgent news. Zhuolong landed in front of Rinpoche and the Empress and shouted, Speak, my lord. The news was left behind by Feng Ping Dao Hucheng. Rinpoche immediately thought of the person that Zhuolong mentioned 2 days ago. He was a lieutenant under Tai Zai, and he didn't know why he had sent a message at this time. The rebels are going to set fire to the city, Zhuolong said coldly. When he saw the news, he was shocked. Then, extreme anger rose in him. He was born and raised in Tianjin Basin. Although it was normal for two armies to use any means in a battle, he didn't expect them to be so ruthless. What are they going to do? Rinpoche's expression became serious. According to the information left behind by Hu Cheng, the rebels have placed many fire starters everywhere in the city. Once they lure our army into the depths of the city, they will set fire to the city. I've already checked just now and saw oil cans and dry firewood in many places. Most of them are in some corners or courtyards. If one didn't know beforehand, it would be very difficult to discover them. Sir, most of the houses in Yoshin City are made of wood. Once the fire starts, it will be difficult to control. Not only will our army suffer heavy casualties, but even the people in the city will have a hard time escaping. The oil cans here were filled with animal fat. Didn't the people in the city evacuate first? Rinpoche was a little surprised. No, otherwise, they would have realized something was wrong the moment they entered the city. They are really ruthless and vicious. Rinpoche suddenly laughed coldly. A corner dog will do something desperate. These rebels are really crazy to want hundreds of thousands of people in the city to be buried with them. Sir, what should we do? Zhuolong asked. Pass down my order. Everyone from the Protectorate will first take away the oil cans on both sides of the main road, pile the firewood together, and leave someone to guard it to ensure that the army is safe when they evacuate. After that, use the main road as the axis and spread out in all directions, mainly searching for the oil cans, Rinpoche said in a deep voice. In a city like this, most people didn't die from being burned to death, but from suffocation due to the smoke. Even if they weren't burned, they would still die from inhaling large amounts of carbon monoxide, hypoxia, and other reasons. As long as the main road was safe, they could at least buy some time for the army to evacuate. After that, they would take away the oil cans in other places. Without the oil cans, even if the fire started, it wouldn't be difficult to clean up immediately. Yes, Your Majesty, what do you think? Rinpoche turned his head and asked. Inform the winged cavalry to block the other 3 city gates and trap the rebels in the city, the Empress said coldly. Originally, in order to reduce casualties, they planned to leave 2 gates for the rebels to escape and then pursue them all the way. Now, the Empress had changed her mind. Your Majesty, if that's the case, I'm afraid that they won't burn the city. Instead, they will fight with their lives on the line, and I'm afraid that there will be more casualties in the end. Why don't we wait for them to start the fire before blocking the other 3 city gates? Rinpoche said coldly. You reap what you sow. Originally, I didn't think of doing this, but since they want to set the city on fire, they can't blame anyone else. Let them perish together with Yoshin City. Sir, then the commoners in the city? Even though Zhuolong's name was cold, he was warm-hearted. After hearing Rinpoche's words, he quivered. Inform Protector General Shi of this matter and ask him to reduce the intensity of the attack. Delay for time and strengthen the attack after most of the oil cans in the south of the city have been transported away. As for the commoners, when the time comes, get someone to lead the commoners in the other 3 directions to escape from the south of the city. How many of them can escape will depend on their fate. Zhuolong was very grateful after hearing this arrangement. He didn't expect the 3 local powers to burn the city and let the hundreds of thousands of commoners die in the sea of fire, just to prevent the aboriginal army from discovering the problem in advance. However, Ren Baqian, who always gave him the impression that he was a ruthless superior, actually gave the commoners a way out. Even though this would inevitably result in a lot of casualties, it could be said that countless people had already survived. Relay these words to Protector General Shi. Get people to keep an eye on the movements of the rebels from high ground. If they discover that the 3 gates are impassable after the fire starts, and a large number of soldiers want to break through the south gate, intercept them immediately. As for you guys, after leading the commoners to escape to the south of the city, roam the city and kill small groups of rebels. Understood, sir, Zhuolong replied. Regret. Chapter 555. Following Ren Baqian's order, the people from the rearguard commandery began to move. Figures jumped from rooftop to rooftop, landed somewhere from time to time, picked up 2 jars, and headed in a certain direction. Since the rebels were prepared to fight and retreat at the same time to lure the aboriginals to the center of the city, there weren't many troops left in the south of the city. The people from the rearguard commandery didn't encounter any obstacles. There's 1 here and 2 in the northwest. An old man stood on the roof and pointed. 3 younger men and women immediately jumped down in the direction he pointed. Soon, they left with the oil cans. The old man's ears twitched. The shouts in front seemed to have lessened. I didn't expect you to have such a plan. It's simply sinful, the old man muttered to himself. As soon as he finished speaking, the old man jumped a few times on the roof. Then, he looked around and found an oil can under a pile of firewood at the back of one of the courtyards. He placed the can on the roof and searched in other directions. Was there a sound on the roof just now? In the house below, a woman was huddled in the arms of a man with a terrified look on her face. Don't think too much. The man forced himself to calm down and said, even if the sky is overturned outside, we will be fine as long as we hide in the house. Although he said this, his face was deathly pale. As time passed, Shiwanya stood on the roof and looked at the slow advance in front of him. His eyes were like an eagle's as he scanned the distance from time to time. His gaze seemed to be able to penetrate the darkness and see the people moving in the dark. Reporting to Protector General Shi, most of the oil jars in the south of the city have been found. Zhuolong reported respectfully as he landed near Shiwanya. Shiwanya nodded and then raised his voice. Hurry up. I hope that by daybreak, there will only be corpses left in the city. Kill. As Shiwanya's voice spread out in the night, the shouts suddenly became louder. In an inconspicuous house in the west of the city, the windows were wide open and there wasn't any light coming out of the room. Only with the help of the moonlight could a few figures be seen sitting in the room. Mr. Ning tilted his head and listened in the distance. Their attack has intensified again. Tai Zai's face was ashen and he remained silent. Based on this intensity, it will take about an hour to reach the City Lord's mansion. Let the fire start from the City Lord's mansion. With the power of a prairie fire, it will burn the entire city. Mr. Ning revealed a smile. It was a rare sight to see an entire city buried along with an aboriginal army. It made his heart beat a little faster. When they attack the City Lord's mansion, we will retreat, Siekuan said. It's a pity that we can't watch such a scene in the city, Mr. Ning said with some regret. Mr. Ning. Tai Zai suddenly spoke. Alliance Master Tai, what's the matter? Mr. Ning turned to look at him. However, he only saw a snow-white light in the darkness, causing his pupils to rapidly dilate. Clang! The sound of swords clashing rang out. Are you crazy? Siekuan blocked Tai Zai's sword with his long saber, his face full of disbelief. You want to kill me? Mr. Ning was also surprised. Regardless of the outcome of this battle, he's already useless. If we win, The ancient race will be defeated and will no longer be able to stop us. There's no point in keeping this person alive. If we lose, even if we escape, we will no longer be able to contend against the ancient race. There's no point in keeping this person alive. Tai Zai had a crazed look on his face as he growled. Let him accompany the commoners in this city and die together. Ha 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 ha. Mr. Ning convulsed with laughter. I'm only the one who came up with the plan, but you are the one who actually implemented it. Now, you can't bear the sin in your heart and want to put the blame on me? You've deceived yourself to this extent. You don't even have the slightest bit of responsibility. How are you going to lead the Northern Alliance? That's right. You are deceiving yourself. Siekuin's face was ashen as he growled. Do you think this battle is over? What happens after that? Who will divert the energy of the Aboriginals? Where will we get weapons? We can send more people to the Yun Nation or even Great Xia. No one will know how he died. Even if they knew, they wouldn't care as long as we are still of value. In order to exterminate the Aboriginals, I will have no face to lead the Northern Alliance after this battle. Taizai said, What do you mean? Siekuin was shocked again. Tianjing Basin doesn't need 3 factions. As long as you can settle the Green Bellflower, you can become the ruler of Tianjing Basin. The 3 factions have been fighting for decades, and it's time to end it, Taizai said coldly. My last request is to kill him. Taizai glanced at Mr. Ning. Mr. Ning's expression changed. Don't forget that you were the one who gave the order. You were right about one thing. It's not a loss to exchange the lives of this city's commoners for the lives of 10,000 barbarians. However, these commoners will be under the rule of the Northern Alliance for generations to come. Therefore, I will die with you and the people of Yoshin City. Taizai's eyes were filled with madness. You are crazy. You are really crazy. Mr. Ning shouted. You are crazy. Siekuin also said, although he was the one who proposed the plan, you were the one who gave the order. Now, you want to kill him? Although I don't know why you are crazy, I don't want to stop you. As Siekuin spoke, he suddenly loosened his grip, and Taizai's sword pierced into Mr. Ning's chest like a dragon. Mr. Ning hugged the sword in his chest and laughed bitterly. What a pitiful person. He then fell to the ground. Do you know that I once thought of dragging you to death with me? However, Tianjing Basin needs a leader, and that woman, Rao Yu, can't do it. Taizai looked at Siekuin and sneered. He pulled out his sword and strode out of the room. Mr. Ning, you know that I can't refuse. Siekuin sheathed his sword and lowered his head. A bunch of wishful thinking people. Mr. Ning muttered to himself as he spat out blood. Wishful thinking? Maybe. How would you know if you don't try? Siekuin laughed. Taizai looked at the blood-stained sword in his hand in the courtyard and remained silent. A man in black landed beside him and said, Sir, there are many martial artists traversing the rooftops in the city. It seems like they are looking for something. It seems like they have discovered it. In that case, pass down the order and let's begin. Taizai finished speaking and strode out of the courtyard. The direction he was heading in was the place where the battle was the most intense. One by one, the guard in the courtyard started to follow behind him. All of you can leave and leave. They're still fighting, and they need a leader, Taizai said without turning his head. But it would be too shabby if the leader doesn't have guard around him, a guard behind him said. Following Taizai's departure, 500 men in black spread out and went to various places in the city. They took out cans of oil from under the pile of firewood in each corner and poured it on the firewood or on the rooftops. When the warlord's residence in the center of the city lit up with a huge flame, sparks lit up everywhere in the city and began to spread and spread. However, looking from a high vantage point, these sparks were all in the east, west, and north of the city. In the south of the city, a man in black rushed to the location where the firewood and oil cans were placed. He was stunned for a moment because the firewood and oil cans that were originally placed there had disappeared. He then rushed to another location, but a sword suddenly fell from the sky and nailed him to the ground. In another place, a man in black searched 3 locations and found that all the oil cans had disappeared. In one place, even the firewood was gone. In the end, he had no choice but to take out a match, squat down, and use it to light the firewood. However, a figure suddenly appeared behind him and slapped him on the head. He immediately spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. A man in black was looking for the storage location of the oil cans. On a tree behind him, Rinpoche sat on a branch, leisurely took out his gun, unlocked the safety, and aimed at the rats below. Bang, bang, bang. Chapter 556. Boom! The east, west, and north city gates of Yoshin City collapsed with a loud bang. Huge rocks smashed into the positions where the city gates had been. Under the despairing gazes of the rebel soldiers who were about to retreat, the city gates were firmly blocked. "Move the rocks. We will all die if we don't get out," a person who looked like a general shouted from within the city. However, what greeted him was a series of grenades thrown from the city walls. At this time, the fire and blood were intertwined in Yoshin City, and the sounds of killing were still incessant. More than half of the city was engulfed in flames. Countless people who were hiding in their homes were driven out by the fire or engulfed by the flames. The thick smoke forced people to cover their mouths, lower their bodies, and flee in panic. The commoners were like fish in a net. Everywhere they looked, there were flames. It was as if the entire city had fallen into a sea of fire. This made them even more panicked. Most of them subconsciously ran in the direction of the nearest city gate. "Run to the south of the city. There's no fire there." A voice came from an unknown location, causing many of the panicking commoners to subconsciously run toward the south of the city. The flow of people led to even more people. People tended to follow the crowd, especially during such a disaster. Figures stood on the roofs of houses outside the line of fire, looking down at the panicking commoners in the dark. From time to time, the glow of weapons would flash, followed by the blood-curdling screams of people dying. Some of the rebel soldiers who were squeezed into the crowd spat out blood and fell to the ground. The Empress stood at the top of the city gate and looked down at the city that had fallen into a sea of fire. Rinpoche was half a body behind her. "Your Majesty, sir, the refugees are surging over," Zwolong said in a deep voice as he landed 10 meters away from them. "Open the city gate. Let them leave the city and send someone with a loud voice to tell them who started the fire," Rinpoche said. At this time, he could already see the surging crowd below, squeezing toward the city gate. Even though it could be considered safe once they reached the south of the city, most of the commoners in the entire city were rushing toward this area. It was already overcrowded, and the crowd was pushing and shoving toward the city gate. Trampling, violence, and all kinds of other things were happening almost all the time. Qing Ping landed in front of the Empress and reported with a head in his hand, "Your Majesty, one of the traitors, Tai Zai, has been beheaded." "Got it." The Empress didn't even look at them. She turned to Rinpoche and said, "Even if these people manage to escape today, they won't be able to hold on until the rations are distributed. Your Majesty, please issue a decree to transfer food and kanji from Xiuyang and the other cities to help them." When you distribute the kanji, tell them who gave them the food. The people who escaped here will definitely remember your Majesty's kindness. Rinpoche thought for a moment and said, "There's no more food in Jiangbei." When the army left, the surplus food was taken away, the Empress said. Although it seemed like she had allowed him to do whatever he wanted recently, it didn't mean that she didn't know anything. "The provisions in Xiuyang City can support us for a few days, but we need the army to return and then transfer the provisions here. It will take at least 3 days. I don't know how many things will happen in these 3 days." Then what is His Majesty's plan? Let the people in the south of the city take out their surplus food and distribute it according to the number of people. It should be able to last for at least a few days. After that, we can transfer food over to ensure that they won't starve to death. As for whether the citizens of the south of the city were willing or not, it was not within her consideration. She was already very kind to make such an arrangement. "Your Majesty, this is the behavior of a wise ruler," Rinpoche said. Do you mean that I was a fatuous ruler in the past? The Empress turned her head and glanced at him. How is that possible? It's just that your Majesty's wisdom in the past was for the sake of the Aboriginals, Rinpoche replied. I see that you have put in a lot of effort for these people these days. We can't let them starve to death, the Empress said faintly. At this time, the area below them was in chaos. Countless people were squeezed together, crying and screaming. The Empress released her aura, which was like a mountain suppressing everyone's heart. The people below immediately quieted down. Everyone felt as if their necks were being strangled, and even breathing became difficult. The Empress withdrew her aura without saying a word. The victims below covered their mouths and didn't dare to make a sound. As expected of your Majesty, just by your aura alone, you're able to calm these panicking people down, Rinpoche praised. The fire is spreading. The Empress ignored him and looked into the distance. Guards! Rinpoche raised his head, took a glance, and ordered the guards. Start from a location near the fire and inform the people in the south of the city to leave their houses with food and leave the city immediately. In addition, let Protector General she send some people to maintain order and prevent chaos among the victims outside the city. The two of them stood on top of the city wall until the sky turned bright and the shouting in the distance became softer. That night, Shiwanya and the soldiers of the Protectorate of the South gradually retreated with the fire and kept the rebel soldiers who wanted to rush out of the city. The winged cavalry stopped the rebel soldiers who wanted to climb over the city wall and escape. As for the Protectorate, after guiding the civilians and clearing up the scattered soldiers, they were put into maintaining order outside the city. Of the 150,000 rebel soldiers, only a few managed to escape. Other than dying under swords, they were suffocated due to lack of oxygen in the fire. Your Majesty, it's over, Rinpoche said from behind the Empress. The Empress's red figure flashed on the city wall and disappeared as she returned to her carriage. When the Empress left, Rinpoche stretched out his hand but grabbed nothing. With his hands behind his back, he leisurely walked down the city wall and could still hear the voices of the people in the distance. Don't you know who set the oil cans and firewood? Her Majesty saved your lives and gave you a way out. All the food will be distributed according to the number of people. As long as you hold on for a few days, the food from Shuiyang City will keep you from starving. Zwolong, Sir Ren, organize these people and find some strong young men to extinguish the fire from the periphery. Search the city for valuables and food that hasn't been destroyed, Rinpoche said. At this time, most of the people used stone jars to store food. Although some houses had been burned, the food in the stone jars was still edible. In addition, dig a pit outside the city and bury the corpses. This is to prevent an epidemic. Also, arrange for people to check the surroundings of the city to see how many rebel soldiers escaped and which direction they went. After giving instructions, Rinpoche stood at the city gate and looked at the civilians who were still in fear and sorrow. He then returned to the side of the Empress's carriage, lay on the ground, and closed his eyes to rest. Not long after, 2 pieces of animal skin were thrown out of the carriage and pasted on his face. Thank you, Your Majesty. Rinpoche happily spread the animal skin under him and fell asleep shortly after. Half a day later, the army returned to Shuiyang City after resting for half a day, except for a few who stayed behind to maintain order. It took them a day and a half to return to Shuiyang City. Before they even entered the city, they smelled blood. After entering the city to understand the situation, Rao led the troops to attack after the army left. The 1,000 Aboriginal soldiers kept the 50,000 rebel soldiers out of the city for 2 days. During this period, Hongcheng also drove many strong young men to the top of the city wall to help defend the city. Under the threat of swords and blood, these young men were really useful. This caused the morale of the rebel soldiers to plummet, and Rao had no choice but to retreat with hatred. However, this also caused the people of Shuiyang City to panic again. Chapter 557. The three of them aren't back yet. After returning to Earth, Ren Baqian and the Empress took a plane back to Shanghai and found it strange that there were only 3 people in the villa. Even if they had to crawl, they should have crawled back to Shanghai in half a month, right? Not only did he buy plane tickets for them, but he also left 50,000 yuan for them. The simplest thing to do would be to take a taxi back to Shanghai. Moreover, the Messier 87 department was watching over them. Nothing could have happened. What happened? The Empress turned to look at him. Ren Baqian explained the situation to her, and she shook her head. Every member of the winged cavalry is a specially selected expert. They won't die even if they are thrown into a dangerous place, let alone on Earth. Although your Majesty is very confident, your winged cavalry has now dropped from 1,500 to 700. Ren Baqian thought to himself, but didn't dare to say it out loud. I'm not afraid of anything happening to them, but I'm afraid that something will happen to others, Ren Baqian replied. This was what he was most worried about. Could the 3 of them be locked up in some secret base? An Earth wheel expert with an IQ wasn't invincible in the city, but it was enough to make people tremble in fear. However, the crux of the problem was the word IQ. Although the Aboriginals weren't fools, their brain structure was abnormally simple. Compared to the people on Earth, they were like pure lambs in all aspects other than killing people, and being cheated was a very common thing. The Empress snapped her fingers playfully. She rubbed her middle and index fingers together from the pad of her thumb like a sword, making the sound of a sword piercing through the air. Ren Baqian looked at the hole that suddenly appeared in the wall, where the Empress's fingers were pointing, and felt that the snapping of her fingers was so cool. She was indeed the Empress. I'll call the Messier 87 to see if they know their whereabouts. Ren Baqian thought for a while, took out his phone, and called Yang Sr., Mr. Run. Yang Sun sighed when he received Ren Baqian's call. Ever since he became the head of the Messier 87 department, he had sighed more often than he had in the previous half of his life. What's wrong? Ren Baqian felt that there was something wrong with Yang Sen's tone and immediately became doubtful. He wondered if the 3 fellows had caused some big trouble. Nothing much, Mr. Ren, you can speak, Yang Sun said. Do you know where my 3 subordinates, the ones I abandoned in the northeast? Ren Baqian asked. Mr. Ren, those are your subordinates. How dare you ask me where they are? And you don't have to be so confident in your tone, right? Yang Sun said, but he was relieved in his heart. Sure enough, the actions of those 3 fellows weren't his idea. Although Ren Baqian had already guessed it from their irregular movements and routes, he was sure of it after hearing Ren Baqian's words. He didn't have to wonder if there were any problems behind this. Minister Yang definitely knows more about this land than I do. Ren Baqian laughed. I do know where they are. Right now, they are guests of honor of the neighboring country's 3rd fatty. Yang Sun opened his mouth and said. Pfft. Ren Baqian immediately spat. His voice rose an octave. What? Where's Sam Pansy? Northern Dynasty? 3rd fatty? The Northeast was indeed not far from there, but how did the 3 of them get there? How did he become that person's distinguished guest? What happened in the 2 weeks that he wasn't around? Why did they go to the Northern Dynasty? Ren Baqian asked with his eyes wide open. You have to ask them about this. That's all we know. However, I still want to say that these 3 subordinates of yours smashed a bathing center, a tea house, destroyed a drug trafficking den, 2 prostitution dens, and ran a red light 13 times on horseback. They also injured 7 policemen, 6 urban management officers, and 2 traffic policemen. Fortunately, no one was killed, Yang Sun said faintly. Ren Baqian's face darkened as Yang Sun spoke. After Yang Sun finished, Ren Baqian didn't know what to say. Ran a red light 13 times on horseback. Where did they get their horses from? They destroyed a drug trafficking den and 2 prostitution dens. Where did they go? He had lived on Earth for so long and had never come into contact with such things. Can you help me send a message to the 3 of them? Get back here? Ren Baqian asked with a black face. He wasn't going to go to the Northern Dynasty to get the 3 of them back. It was more reliable for the Messier 87 department to handle this matter. I'll try my best. You must bring the three of them back and tell them that Big Boss is going to skin them. Ren Bachien continued. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. The Empress looked indifferent. They are too troublesome. Ren Bachien didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Oh, if they're too powerful, give them a few whips. The Empress said. Ren Bachien grinned. Your Majesty, do you know what the word law means? Do you know how to write this word? Have you seen it before? Huh. Ren Bachien thought about it and sighed again. Well, what you say is the law. Ren Bachien sat back on the sofa and stopped thinking about those two people. He accompanied the Empress to play Honor of Kings, which he hadn't played for a long time. Half an hour later, a player on his side finally wailed. Brothers, do I have any enmity with you? Why you keep tricking me? Why am I always on the same team as you? Ren Bachien thought about it and replied, This is love. 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 Brother, I'm still a child. Your love is too deep. It's better to be fair and share some with others. That person wailed. After teasing a few of their companions, the two of them went offline contentedly. They watched TV for a while, and Ren Bachien's attention was suddenly attracted by an advertisement for an educational robot. This suddenly reminded him of something. These days, he didn't have the time to teach those students, and it wasn't a good idea to let them wander around with the army. A few months of delay would be wasted. If he could get them a robot and find time to answer some of their questions, it would probably be much faster. After thinking about this matter, Ren Bachien immediately took out his phone and began to search for information about robots. He found out that robots on Earth had improved a lot in the past 3 years. Modern humans were getting lazier and had a higher and higher quality of life. The huge demand had driven the rapid development of robots. At the very least, the robot that he saw in the advertisement was from a company that he had never heard of before. He was surprised to find out that this company used to make inflatable dolls. This made his eyeballs almost fall out of their sockets. This company first made inflatable dolls, then adult robots. Now, even some foreign brothels use their robots to satisfy some customers, and the reviews were pretty good. Since last year, they set up a new company called Linkage Intelligence and aimed at educational robots. Now, they mainly launched family education robots, and they had a good reputation in all aspects. Whether it was the voice recognition system or the conversation system, they were quite logical. Upon seeing this, Ren Bachien began to become interested in this company. However, they were currently making family education robots, which were far from what Ren Bachien wanted. Furthermore, they needed to rely on the internet. The basic requirement for the robot that Ren Bachien needed was to have its own database. As for the voice recognition system and the conversation system, he didn't need to worry about them as they could basically meet his needs. At the thought of this, Ren Bachien called the company. Whenever this happened, Ren Bachien felt that being rich was indeed a pleasant thing. This was especially true on Earth, where money could solve most problems as long as it was within the scope of current technology. For example, the current situation. However, he still needed to know the level of this company and whether it could meet his requirements. Otherwise, he would have to find another company. High-end robots had always been the target of the other party. After hearing Ren Bachien's request, they were very interested. Chapter 558. The laboratory of Linkage Intelligence wasn't far from Shanghai. It was located in Hangzhou, which was known as the land of fish and rice, the land of silk, and heaven on earth. Of course, the most praised thing about Hangzhou was the romance that was circulating here. The protagonists were a human and a snake. Ren Bachien had never been able to figure out how their child came to be. Ren Bachien told the Empress about his itinerary, and she was very interested in these so-called robots. After all, she found it very novel that these robots were completely made of machinery, could speak, communicate, and could do many things that only humans could do. The next morning, the two of them arrived at the Science and Technology Park in Hangzhou. They found the address given by the other party, made a call, and soon, someone rushed over. The person was a man in his 40s, and he was amazed when he saw the Empress. He then restrained his expression and said to the two of them, "Are you Mr. Ren from the phone?" Hello, I'm a sales manager of Linkage Intelligence. My name is Jiao Han. Rin Baqian smiled playfully. Most people introduce themselves with the surname Li or Zhang, but the other party couldn't say that his surname was Jiao. Excuse me. Jiao Han knew what Rin Baqian was thinking by looking at his expression. He smiled generously and didn't seem to mind. Please follow me. Jiao Han smiled and led the way. The three of them went all the way to the 15th floor before arriving at a laboratory that wasn't very big. A computer took up about half of the space. The remaining half of the space was filled with all kinds of robots. Half of them were humanoid or half-humanoid. Some of them even had a layer of silicone skin. They looked very similar to real people. From a distance, it was really not easy to tell that they were real just by looking at their upper bodies. After all, this was the other party's specialty. Rin Baqian looked at these robots that were more beautiful and exquisite than humans and thought that it was no wonder their company's products were selling well overseas. He had to admit that these things were really the welfare of an otaku. With such simulated robots, if they had a certain level of intelligence, the future population would probably be worrying. However, this was a problem for the higher-ups and had nothing to do with him. On the contrary, the Empress didn't think as much about these things as Rin Baqian, or rather, she didn't think about these things at all. She looked at the robots in front of her with interest and pinched her face. "You're hurting me." The robot that was kneading the face of the Empress suddenly opened its eyes and said. The electronic voice sounded a little weird and spoke very slowly. However, the content gave the Empress and Rin Baqian shock. "This is a joke." The robot grinned. It looked stiff, but it was a smile. "Do you know what you're talking about?" Rin Baqian took a few steps forward to take a closer look. The silicone skin of this robot extended from the top of its head to the bottom of its neck, and it had a temperature that was close to that of a human. Its appearance was exquisite, and it was very much in line with the Eastern aesthetic standards. Appropriate jokes can shorten the distance between people, including robots, the robot said. "Do you have a name?" "Yeah, this is my name. If you can remember it, I will be very happy." Can you think? Thinking is a very difficult question for me to answer, but it is also a trait that I hope to possess. But judging from the current situation, I still have a long way to go. "How did you do it?" Rin Baqian turned to look at Jiao Han and asked. "According to the database, she will give different answers in different situations. Just now, when this lady was pinching Yuya's face, she was woken up from standby. In this aspect, even if we aren't the best, we aren't much worse than other countries," Jiao Han said with a smile. He was very satisfied with their reactions. "Yuting, you have guessed." The two half-bodied robots beside Yu opened their eyes upon hearing Jiao Han's voice. With a slow electronic voice, they said, "Hello, guest." "Hello, Manager Jiao." "Look, they can be woken up from standby by calling their names." Jiao Han laughed. "I'm starting to have confidence in the capabilities of your company," Rin Baqian exclaimed. It had to be said that these robots, which weren't well known in the past, were too surprising for Rin Baqian, whose knowledge of technology was still 3 years old. Next, Jiao Han demonstrated some of the abilities of the robots. During his observation, Rin Baqian realized that the performance of the robots in terms of intelligence wasn't as outstanding as he had imagined, but they had already met most of his requirements. The only problem was that these robots were connected to the database through the network. Rin Baqian didn't know how far the robots could go after disconnecting from the network. "I don't see anyone from the lab," Rin Baqian asked. "This is the exhibition area. Today is the weekend, so most people are on vacation," Jiao Han replied. "Please follow me to my office." Next, Jiao Han brought them to his office. Apart from him, there was also a bespectacled lady who was said to be from the lab. Jiao Han poured them a cup of tea and asked, "What requirements do you have for the robots?" "I want the robots to be able to complete university-level teaching tasks. Unlike the monotonous teaching methods of your home robots, they can be as active and interactive as possible, just like a real teacher." Jiao Han nodded. Using a robot as a teacher was something many people wanted. It was actually quite difficult to reach the stage of interactive teaching, but it was not impossible. As long as there was a huge database, it could be done in another way. Without the network, the data is stored in the robots. Jiao Han looked at the bespectacled lady. The lady pondered for a while and said, "That depends on what kind of data you want to store. The amount of data can't be too large, or it will reduce other aspects of performance." The lady's voice was a little hoarse. "Mathematics, logic, chemistry, biology," Ren Baqian replied. "If it's a university course, it can be done." The lady nodded. Hearing this, Jiao Han also laughed. "It needs to be able to project mathematical formulas, derivations, physics, and the steps of chemical experiments in a simple and clear way. In addition, I want it to have a mechanical style, such as a transformer or a Gundam. Can they move on their own? It's best if they can walk on their own and charge themselves. In addition, the battery must be high. I don't want a toy that will run out of battery in less than 10 minutes. Ren Baqian listed out some of the requirements he had in mind. Finally, the other party gave him a price of 16 million yuan for a teaching robot that could last for half a day, charge itself, project images, and interact. Ren Baqian immediately ordered 2 units. As for the delivery time, it was 3 months. After both parties signed a contract, Jiao Han asked curiously, "I'm a little curious about what you do, Mr. Ren. After all, using such an expensive robot for this is forgive me, a little wasteful. At present, such custom-made robots could only be considered toys for the rich, and he could understand any strange requirements. However, the strangest thing was that the person in front of him only asked for teaching capabilities. 16 million yuan could hire 2 teachers for 1,600 months, which was 133 years. In other words, 266 teachers for a year and 26 teachers for 10 years. I'm a village teacher. The robots are prepared for the children in the mountain villages." Ren Baqian's reply stunned Jiao Han, and he laughed. "Village teacher? This was just a joke from a tycoon, and anyone who took it seriously would be a fool." However, when he thought about the 2 robots that only asked for teaching capabilities, Jiao Han felt that this wasn't impossible. He glanced at the Empress. The story of a rich second generation who went to a village to teach in order to impress his sweetheart immediately formed in his mind. After leaving the building, the Empress whispered into Ren Baqian's ear and asked, "Did you say that Dayo is a village?" Ren Baqian tilted his head, and the Empress's soft red lips gently brushed against his face. Ren Baqian felt that this was the truth. However, the Empress's expression seemed a little dangerous, and her eyes were full of ridicule. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.